Aboard the glittering blue train, bound for the French Riviera, a priceless ruby, the heart of fire, sparkles with a deadly curse. When a chilling cry echoes through the night, Hercule Poirot's razor-sharp instincts awaken. Who slipped from Ruth Kettering's compartment under moonlight? Why does her estranged husband hide a cigarette case marked K? And what secrets does the shadowy jewel thief, the Marquise, conceal? As murder strikes and deception unravels, Poirot, little grey cells race against time. Will he unmask the killer before the azure locomotive reaches its final stop? Chapter 1. The glitter of departure of the platform at Victoria Station shimmered with the frenetic energy of a London evening, its air thick with the scent of coal smoke and anticipation. It was February 1928, and the blue train, that gleaming serpent of luxury bound for the French Riviera, stood ready to whisk its passengers into a world of opulence and mystery. Its azure carriages, polished to a mirror-like sheen, reflected the gaslights overhead, casting a kaleidoscope of golden flickers. Across the bustling crowd, porters darted through the throng, their caps bobbing like corks in a turbulent sea, while the clatter of trunks and the murmur of farewells filled the air with a symphony of departure. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with a moustache, as precise as a geometric theorem, stood at the edge of Platform 8, his patent leather shoes gleaming beneath the hem of his immaculate overcoat. His sharp green eyes, alight with curiosity, scanned the scene with the precision of a watchmaker. He was no stranger to grand departures, yet there was something about the blue trainer, certain je ne sais quoi that stirred his little grey cells. Perhaps it was the promise of intrigue, or perhaps it was the way the train seemed to hum with secrets, its very name evoking the azure allure of the Mediterranean. Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, tilting it just so, and glanced at his pocket watch. 7 minutes until departure. The platform was a tableau of human stories. A young couple clasped hands, their whispered promises drowned by the station's din. An elderly dowager, draped in furs, scolded her harried maid, and a businessman, his briefcase clutched like a talisman, barked orders into a telephone. But Poirot's attention was drawn to a woman standing alone near the first-class carriage, her silhouette framed against the train's gleaming flank dot. She was Ruth Kettering, an American heiress whose beauty was as renowned as her wealth. Her auburn hair, swept beneath a cloche hat adorned with a single peacock feather, caught the light like burnished copper. Around her neck gleamed the heart of fire, a ruby so large and luminous it seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The gem, a gift from her father, Rufus van Aldine, was said to carry a curse, a whisper of tragedy that followed its owners. Ruth's sapphire blue dress clung to her slender frame, its fabric catching the station's glow, yet her posture betrayed a tension that belied her elegance. Her gloved hands fidgeted with a silk handkerchief, and her eyes darted toward the crowd, searching for someone or something. Poirot's gaze narrowed. He had read of Ruth Kettering in the society pages, the daughter of a steel magnate, married to Derek Kettering, a charming but feckless Englishman whose debts were as notorious as his smile. The papers hinted at a marriage fraying at the edges, strained by infidelity and ambition. Poirot wondered what had brought her to the blue train, alone and visibly uneasy. His musings were interrupted by a low, throaty whistle from the locomotive, a signal that departure was imminent. As he stepped toward the train, Poirot noticed another figure, a man, lean and shadowed, lingering near a lamppost. His face was obscured by a fedora pulled low, but his posture was predatory, his eyes fixed on Ruth. When she turned, as if sensing his gaze, the man melted into the crowd, his movements as fluid as a spectre's. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "the game, it begins already." He boarded the train, his small frame navigating the narrow corridor with the grace of a dancer. The first-class carriage was a marvel of Art Deco splendor, polished mahogany panels, velvet curtains in shades of indigo and gold, and crystal chandeliers that cast prismatic light across the compartment. The air was heavy with the scent of lavender and cigar smoke, a heady blend that spoke of wealth and indulgence. Poirot settled into his seat, a plush armchair beside a window, and opened his copy of Le Figaro, though his eyes remained alert, scanning the passengers as they boarded. Among them was Catherine Grey, a quiet Englishwoman in her 30s, her plain grey coat a stark contrast to the train's opulence. Poirot had overheard her conversation with the porter. She was newly wealthy, having inherited a fortune from an elderly employer she had nursed in her final days. Her face, unadorned by makeup, radiated a calm intelligence, and her hazel eyes held a spark of curiosity that intrigued Poirot. She took a seat across the aisle, her hands folded neatly in her lap, a small leather-bound book perhaps, a diary clutched in her fingers. The carriage filled with other notables, Derek Kettering, whose boyish charm was tempered by a restless energy, accompanied by Morel, a French dancer with kohl-rimmed eyes and a laugh like breaking glass, the Comte de la Roche, a suave aristocrat whose interest in rare gems was whispered in Parisian salons, and Major Knighton, Rufus Van Aldine, private secretary, a man whose stiff demeanor masked a sharp mind. Each passenger, Poirot noted, seemed to carry a secret, their glances and gestures weaving a tapestry of unspoken tensions. That as the train lurched forward, its wheels singing against the tracks, Poirot's thoughts returned to Ruth Kettering. She had taken a private compartment at the end of the carriage, its door firmly closed, yet the faint sound of her pacing could be heard through the polished wood. Poirot's intuition, honed by years of unraveling human motives, told him she was afraid not of the journey, but of something, or someone. Aboard the train, the first hour passed in a blur of clinking glasses and murmured conversations. In the dining car, Poirot ordered a tisane, its delicate aroma soothing his senses as he observed his fellow passengers. Ruth emerged from her compartment, her face pale but composed, and joined Catherine Grey at a table. Their conversation, though hushed, reached Poirot's ears, carried by the quiet hum of the train. "You must think me terribly forward," Ruth said, her American accent softened by a nervous edge. "But I noticed you reading. It's rare to see someone so calm on this train." Catherine smiled, her voice gentle but firm. "It's my first time traveling like this. I suppose I'm trying to take it all in." "You seem preoccupied, Mrs. Kettering." Ruth's laugh was brittle, like porcelain on the verge of cracking. "Oh, it's nothing. Just the weight of too many expectations. And this," she touched the ruby at her throat, its facets catching the chandelier's light. "It feels heavier than it should." Poirot's ears pricked at the mention of the ruby. He leaned forward, pretending to adjust his cufflinks, as Ruth continued. "My father gave it to me, you know. He says it's a talisman, but I sometimes wonder if it's a curse. Everyone looks at it, everyone wants it." Catherine's brow furrowed. "It's beautiful, but perhaps it draws the wrong kind of attention." Ruth's eyes flickered toward the dining car's entrance, where Derek Kettering stood, his arm around Morel. The dancer's scarlet gown was a stark contrast to Ruth's understated elegance, and her laughter rang out, drawing every eye. Derek's smile was strained, his gaze darting between his wife and his mistress. Poirot noted the tension, a silent storm brewing beneath the surface. Before Ruth could respond, a steward approached, his uniform crisp as a military officer's. "Mrs. Kettering, a telegram for you." He handed her a folded slip of paper, his gloved hand steady. Ruth's fingers trembled as she opened it, her face draining of color. She crumpled the telegram and excused herself, hurrying back to her compartment. Poirot's curiosity burned. He rose, intending to follow, but was intercepted by the Comte de la Roche, who bowed with theatrical flair. "Monsieur Poirot, a pleasure. I have heard of your little grey cells. Tell me, do you travel for pleasure or purpose?" Poirot's smile was polite but guarded. "A bit of both, Monsieur le Comte. And you?" "The Riviera is a playground for men of your tastes." The Comte's eyes gleamed, his fingers toying with a gold cigarette case. "Oh, I seek beauty in all its forms, gems, art, women. This train is a treasure trove." Now their conversation was cut short by a sudden jolt of the train, a screech of brakes that sent glasses tumbling in the dining car. Passengers gasped, clutching their seats, as the train slowed to a crawl. Poirot's gaze darted to the window, where the darkened countryside stretched endlessly, broken only by the occasional flicker of a distant village. The steward reappeared, his face apologetic. "A minor delay, Madame T. Messieurs. A signal issue. We shall resume shortly." Poirot's instincts flared. He excused himself from the Comte and made his way toward Ruth's compartment, his steps measured but purposeful. The corridor was quiet, save for the soft creak of the train and the distant clink of cutlery. As he approached Ruth's door, he noticed it was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the corridor. He knocked gently, receiving no response. With a glance to ensure he was unobserved, he pushed the door open. The compartment was empty. Ruth's fur coat draped over a chair, her handbag open on the table. The heart of fire was nowhere to be seen. Poirot's heart quickened, but his mind remained calm, cataloguing details. A glass of untouched champagne, a faint smudge of lipstick on the rim, a single peacock feather, fallen from her hat, lying on the floor, and, most curiously, a scrap of paper tucked beneath the cushion, bearing the words, "Leave it behind, or lose everything." Before he could investigate further, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Poirot slipped out, closing the door silently, and returned to his seat just as Ruth reappeared, her face composed but her eyes red-rimmed. She had been crying, yet she carried herself with the poise of a woman determined to conceal her fears. Poirot watched as she rejoined Catherine, her smile forced, and resumed their conversation as if nothing had occurred. The train shuddered back to life, its wheels grinding against the tracks, and the passengers relaxed, their laughter resuming. But Poirot's mind was elsewhere, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that had only just begun to form. The shadowy man on the platform, the cryptic telegram, the empty compartment, the ominous note all pointed to a mystery that was as much about human passions as it was about a priceless gem. As the blue train gathered speed, its azure cars slicing through the night, Poirot leaned back in his seat, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "A bean," he murmured. "The journey promises to be most illuminating." He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing he had glimpsed the first threads of a tapestry that would unravel in the days to come. The platform's glitter had faded, replaced by the gleam of suspicion, and Hercule Poirot was ready to follow it wherever it led. Chapter 2. Whispers in the dining car. The blue train glided through the French countryside, its azure cars slicing through the dusk like a sapphire blade. The rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks pulsed like a heartbeat, steady yet urgent, as if the train itself sensed the secrets it carried. Hercule Poirot sat in the opulent dining car, his sharp eyes scanning the room over a crystal flute of champagne. The air shimmered with the clink of silverware, the murmur of cultured voices, and the faint perfume of wealth. Chandeliers swayed gently, casting golden fractals across mahogany paneling, and the scent of roasted pheasant mingled with the temps of anticipation. Poirot adjusted his pristine white napkin, his movements precise, as if aligning the universe itself. He was not here merely to dine, he was here to observe. The dining car was a stage, its passengers unwitting actors in a drama yet to unfold. His gaze settled on Ruth Kettering, the American heiress, seated 3 tables away. Her auburn hair gleamed under the chandelier's glow, and the heart of fire ruby at her throat pulsed with a deep, almost malevolent red. The gem, a gift from her father, Rufus Van Aldine, was said to be worth a king's ransom and cursed, if whispers were to be believed. Ruth's fingers grazed the stone, her expression a mix of pride and unease, as if it weighed more than its carats suggested. Beside her sat Catherine Grey, a quiet Englishwoman whose recent inheritance had elevated her from governess to guest. On this luxurious journey, Catherine's dove-grey dress was modest yet elegant, her demeanour calm but curious. She listened intently as Ruth spoke, her voice low, but carrying a tremor that piqued Poirot's interest. "It's not just the ruby, Catherine," Ruth said, her American accent softened by years abroad. "It's what it represents. Freedom, yes, but also a cage." Her eyes darted to the far end of the car, where her husband, Derek Kettering, lounged with a glass of cognac, his dark hair tousled and his smile sharp as a blade. Derek was a study in contrasts to Ruth's polished unease. His tailored suit was impeccable, but his posture slouched, almost defiant, suggested a man at odds with his surroundings. Beside him sat Morel, his French mistress, her raven hair cascading in waves, her scarlet gown a deliberate provocation. Her laughter rang out, too loud for the refined setting, drawing frowns from nearby diners. Poirot noted the way Derek's hand lingered on her wrist, a gesture both possessive and performative. Morel leaned closer, whispering something that made Derek's smile tighten, his eyes flicking toward Ruth for the briefest moment. Poirot sipped his champagne, the bubbles sharp against his tongue. The dining car was a microcosm of motives, each passenger a thread in a tapestry of intrigue. He turned his attention to a nearby table, where a wiry man with a pencil-thin mustache and a pinstriped suit spoke in hushed tones to a woman in emerald silk. The man's French was rapid, his gestures animated, but his eyes kept straying to Ruth's table. Poirot recognized him as the Comte de la Roche, a minor aristocrat with a reputation for charm and an unhealthy fascination with rare gems. The woman, introduced earlier as Madame Claire Duval, a Parisian art dealer, nodded absently, her own gaze fixed on the ruby at Ruth's throat. Mon ami, Poirot murmured to himself. The stage is set, and the players are restless. He leaned back, his small, neat hands folded, and let the conversation at Ruth's table drift to his ears. Ruth was speaking again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Derek thinks he can control me with his debts and his dalliances," she said, her fingers tightening around her wineglass. "But this ruby, it's mine, Catherine. My father gave it to me to remind me of my worth. Derek will never touch it." Catherine's grey eyes softened with sympathy. "You don't have to. Stay, Ruth. You're stronger than he knows." Her words were gentle but firm, a quiet strength that surprised Poirot. Catherine Grey, he noted, was no mere bystander. Her inheritance might have bought her a ticket on this train, but her perception could prove invaluable. A waiter glided past, balancing a silver tray of creme brulee, and Poirot seized the moment to shift his focus. Across the car, a new figure caught his eye, a man in his late 40s, broad-shouldered and impeccably dressed, with a face weathered by sun and secrets. Major Richard Knighton, Rufus Van Aldine's private secretary, sat alone, his meal untouched. His eyes, however, were anything but idle, tracking the room with a predator's focus. When his gaze landed on Ruth, it lingered, not with desire but with something called a calculation. Perhaps Poirot filed this away, his little grey cells humming. The dining car's atmosphere shifted as the train curved through a tunnel, the chandeliers flickering briefly, casting shadows that danced like spectres. A low murmur rose from a corner table, where two businessmen, by their stiff collars and gold cufflinks, spoke in clipped German. One, a heavy-set man with a florid face, gestured toward Ruth's table, his voice carrying just enough for Poirot to catch a phrase. "Das Herz, des Feuers," the heart of fire. The other man, lean and bespectacled, shook his head sharply, as if warning his companion to lower his voice. Poirot's mustache twitched. The ruby was not just a jewel, it was a magnet for greed. Ruth's voice rose slightly, drawing Poirot's attention back. "Catherine, do you ever feel watched? Not just noticed, but hunted?" Her hand touched the ruby again, almost reflexively. Catherine frowned, glancing around the car. "It's this train," she said softly. "It's beautiful, but it feels like a gilded trap. Everyone's watching everyone else." Poirot nodded to himself. Catherine's intuition was sharp, her words echoing his own thoughts. The blue train was a crucible, its luxury a veneer over darker currents. He noted the way Ruth's shoulders tensed, her gaze flickering to Derek and Morel, then to the Comte, who was now laughing too loudly at something Madame Duval said. The dynamics were clear. Ruth was a woman caught in a web of envy, desire, and resentment. The meal progressed. Dessert plates cleared away, and the dining car began to empty. Poirot lingered, savoring a final sip of coffee, its bitterness grounding his thoughts. He overheard a new snippet of conversation as the German businessman passed his table. "If the ruby disappears," the heavy-set one muttered, "it won't be the first time. The curse always finds a way." His companion hushed him again, but Poirot's mind was already racing. A curse, superstition, perhaps, but in Poirot's experience, such tales often cloaked human malice. Ruth rose, excusing herself with a polite smile to Catherine. As she moved toward the corridor, her silk gown rustling, Poirot noticed her pause at the dining car's entrance. She glanced back, not at Derek or Morel, but at Major Knighton, who met her gaze with a nod so subtle it might have been missed. Poirot did not miss it. The exchange was brief, almost conspiratorial, and Ruth's expression, fear mixed with defiance, told him more than words could. Catherine remained at the table, her hands folded, her eyes following Ruth's departure. Poirot approached, his manner courteous but deliberate. "Mademoiselle Grey," he said, bowing slightly, "may I join you for a moment? I am Hercule Poirot, and I find myself intrigued by the atmosphere of this journey." Catherine's smile was warm but guarded. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot, I've heard of you. You're the detective, aren't you? The one who sees what others miss." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "You flatter me, mademoiselle. But tell me, what do you see? You have the air of one who observes, not merely looks." Catherine hesitated, then leaned forward, her voice low. "I see a woman afraid. Monsieur Poirot, Ruth Kettering is carrying more than that ruby. She's carrying a burden, her marriage, her father's expectations, maybe even her own choices, and I see others watching her, not all with kind intentions." Poirot nodded, impressed. "And who, pray, do you find most intriguing?" She glanced toward the corridor where Ruth had vanished. "Derek Kettering is trouble, but not the kind you'd expect. He's angry, but it's not just at Ruth. Morel, she's a fire ready to burn everything down. And that man, the Comte, he's too smooth, like he's playing a part. But it's the quiet ones, like Major Knighton, who worry me most. He's too still, too watchful." Poirot's mustache curved upward. "You are a student of human nature, Mademoiselle Gray. Tell me, have you noticed anything unusual tonight? A gesture, a word, perhaps?" Catherine frowned, her fingers tracing the edge of her napkin. "There was something, when Ruth spoke about the ruby, she kept looking at her maid, Ada Mason, who was waiting near the door. Ada seemed nervous, not just attentive, but like she was waiting for a signal. And when Ruth left, Ada followed her so quickly. It was almost as if she didn't want Ruth out of her sight." Poirot's eyes narrowed. Ada Mason, the maid, had been a shadow in the background, her plain black dress and downcast eyes rendering her nearly invisible. Yet shadows, Poirot knew, often concealed the most vital clues. "Most interesting, mademoiselle," he said. "You have given me much to consider." As Catherine excused herself to retire, Poirot remained, his mind a whirl of connections. The ruby, the curse, the watchful Isich was a piece of a puzzle he was only beginning to assemble. He rose, adjusting his tie, and stepped into the corridor. The train's gentle sway, a reminder of time moving forward, carrying its secrets toward an inevitable reckoning. The corridor was quiet, save for the distant hum of conversation from the lounge car. Poirot paused outside Ruth's compartment, noting the faint glow of light beneath her door. He considered knocking but thought better of it. Instead, he moved toward the lounge, where he found Derek Kettering alone, a cigarette burning between his fingers. The man's face was a mask of frustration, his eyes distant. "Monsieur Kettering," Poirot said, his tone light but probing. "A fine evening, Nan, yet you seem preoccupied." Derek's laugh was bitter. "Preoccupied, that's one way to put it. This train, this whole damned journey, it's a farce. Ruth parades that ruby like a trophy, and everyone's salivating over it. You'd think it was the only thing that matters." Poirot tilted his head. "And to you, monsieur, what matters?" Derek's eyes met his, sharp and guarded. "Freedom," he said simply. "But freedom comes at a price, doesn't it, Monsieur Poirot?" Before Poirot could respond, a sharp cry echoed from the direction of the sleeping Kaiserwoman's voice, cut off abruptly. Derek's cigarette fell to the floor, his face paling. Poirot was already moving, his small frame surprisingly swift, his mind racing with possibilities. The cry had come from Ruth's compartment, he was certain. The dining car's whispers had given way to something darker, and Poirot knew the blue train's journey had just taken a perilous turn. As he reached the corridor, he saw Ada Mason, standing outside Ruth's door, her face ashen, her hands trembling. "Monsieur Poirot," she stammered, I heard something. I think Madame Kettering is in trouble." Poirot's eyes locked onto hers, searching for truth or deception. "Remain here, mademoiselle," he said firmly. "We shall see what trouble has found Madame Kettering." Chapter 3. The Shadow at Midnight. The blue train thundered through the French countryside, its rhythmic clatter a hypnotic counterpoint to the velvet darkness beyond its windows. Hercule Poirot, nestled in his first-class compartment, had retired for the night, his meticulous mind still humming with the day's observations. The gleam of Ruth Kettering's heart of fire ruby, the flicker of unease in her eyes, the cryptic whispers in the dining carol, these fragments danced in his thoughts, refusing to settle. He adjusted his silk pajamas, smoothed his moustache, and prepared to surrender to sleep, trusting his little grey cells to work their magic in the quiet hours. But sleep eluded him. The train's gentle sway, usually soothing, felt tonight like the pulse of something restless, something watchful. Poirot's compartment, with its polished wood paneling and soft amber lighting, was a cocoon of luxury, yet an undercurrent of disquiet stirred within him. He glanced at his pocket watch. 11:47 p.m. The world outside was a blur of moonlit fields, the occasional silhouette of a tree or farmhouse flashing by like a fleeting ghost. Then it came, a sound, faint but unmistakable, a muffled cry, sharp and fleeting, slicing through the hum of the train. Poirot sat upright, his senses razor-sharp. The cry had come from somewhere down the corridor, in the direction of the first-class compartments. He waited, ears straining, but the sound did not repeat. Instead, there was only the steady rumble of the train and the distant clink of a glass from the dining car, where a late-night reveller lingered. Poirot slipped into his dressing gown, its rich burgundy fabric a stark contrast to the pale moonlight filtering through the window. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the door handle. To intrude on a fellow passenger's privacy was not his custom, yet the cry had carried a note of distress, a jagged edge that pricked his instincts. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "the little grey cells, they do not rest when danger whispers." He stepped into the corridor, his slippered feet silent on the plush carpet. The first-class carriage was a study in opulence, its walls adorned with Art Deco flourishes, its brass fittings gleaming under the soft glow of sconces. The corridor was deserted, the other passengers presumably asleep behind their locked doors. Poirot moved with the caution of a cat, his eyes scanning for any sign of disturbance. The train swayed gently, the shadows shifting with each curve of the tracks. As he approached the compartment of Ruth Kettering, number 7, he paused. The door was closed, the brass number plate glinting faintly. He leaned closer, listening, but heard only the faint creak of the carriage. Then, a movement, a shadow, swift and deliberate, passed under the door's gap, as if someone inside had shifted position. Poirot's heart quickened. He raised his hand to knock, then froze as the shadow moved again, followed by the soft click of a latch. The door opened a fraction, and a figure slipped out, moving with the practiced stealth of one accustomed to avoiding notice. The dim lighting obscured the man's face, but Poirot caught a glimpse of a dark overcoat, the collar turned up, and a hat pulled low. The figure glanced down the corridor, away from Poirot, and then moved swiftly toward the rear of the carriage, disappearing around a corner. Poirot's mind raced, to follow or to investigate the compartment. The cry had come from this direction, and Ruth Kettering's unease at dinner lingered in his memory. He knocked softly on her door, his voice low but firm. "Madame Kettering," said Poirot. "Are you well?" No response. He knocked again, louder this time, but the silence was heavy, unbroken. His unease deepened. He tried the handle, expecting it to be locked, but to his surprise, it turned easily. The door swung open, revealing a compartment bathed in moonlight. The bed was neatly made, the curtains drawn back, but Ruth Kettering was not there. Her traveling case sat open on the bench, its contents silk scarves, a silver hairbrush, a bottle of perfume scattered, as if someone had rifled through them in haste. Poirot stepped inside, his eyes darting over every detail. The air carried a faint trace of jasmine, Ruth's scent, but something else lingered, a sharper, metallic temps. He bent down, inspecting the carpet, and noticed a small, dark smear near the bed. Blood. His fingers hovered over it, but he did not touch it, preserving the scene. "Curio," he muttered. "Very curious indeed." He straightened, his mind cataloguing possibilities. Had Ruth left her compartment willingly? Had the cry been hers, or someone else's? And who was the man who had slipped out moments ago? Poirot's gaze fell on a small object glinting in the moonlight, a cigarette case, half hidden beneath a fold of the bedspread. He retrieved it carefully, noting the engraved initial K on its surface. Derek Kettering, Ruth's estranged husband, came to mind, but Poirot's instincts cautioned against hasty assumptions. He left the compartment, closing the door softly, and moved toward the rear of the carriage, where the mysterious figure had vanished. The corridor opened into a narrow vestibule, where a door led to the next carriage. Poirot pushed it open, stepping into the second-class section, where the lighting was dimmer, the furnishings less lavish. The air here was thicker, tinged with the faint smell of tobacco and sweat. A porter, a wiry man with a pinched face, was polishing a brass railing. He looked up, startled, as Poirot approached. "Monsieur Poirot," said, his voice calm but authoritative, "did a gentleman pass through here just now? A man in a dark coat, perhaps with a hat." The porter, whose name tag read Pierre, hesitated, his eyes flickering with something like unease. "Nan, monsieur, I've seen no one. It's late, and most passengers are asleep." Poirot's mustache twitched. The porter's denial was too quick, too practiced. "You are certain?" A cry was heard, and I myself saw a man leave the first-class carriage. "It is most important, you understand." Pierre shifted, his hands fidgeting with the polishing cloth. "Perhaps "I did see someone, monsieur, but only for a moment. He went toward the dining car, I think. I didn't get a good look." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, Pierre. You have been most helpful." He turned, as if to leave, then paused. "One more thing, did you hear a cry? Perhaps 10 minutes ago." The porter's face paled. "A cry? Nan, monsieur, the train. It makes many noises. Perhaps it was the brakes, or the wind." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone laced with skepticism. He left the porter and moved toward the dining car, his mind turning over the encounter. Pierre's unease suggested he knew more than he admitted, but pressing him now would yield little. Poirot preferred to let such men stew in their own secrets, revealing them in time. The dining car was nearly empty, its crystal chandeliers casting a soft glow over the white tablecloths. A single waiter, a young man with tired eyes, was clearing glasses from a table. At the far end, a lone passenger sat, nursing a glass of cognac. It was the Comte de la Roche, Ruth Kettering's former lover, his elegant frame draped in a tailored suit. His presence here, at this hour, was unexpected. "Monsieur le Comte," Poirot said, approaching with a polite smile. "You find the night too restless for sleep, perhaps?" The Comte looked up, his dark eyes gleaming with amusement. "Monsieur Poirot, the detective, I might say the same of you. The blue train, she is beautiful, but her charms keep one awake, Nan." Poirot inclined his head, taking a seat opposite the Comte. "Indeed, and yet I am disturbed by more than the train's charms. A cry, monsieur, a cry in the night. Did you hear it?" The Comte's smile faltered, but only for a moment. "A cry, Nan. I heard nothing. This cognac, it dulls the senses, you see." He raised his glass, but his hand trembled slightly, betraying his composure. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You were in the dining car all evening. Then you did not, perhaps, pass through the first-class corridor?" The Comte laughed, a sound too bright for the quiet car. "You suspect me of wandering, monsieur. I assure you, I have been here, enjoying the solitude. Ask the waiter if you doubt me." Poirot glanced at the waiter, who was now wiping down a counter, his movements slow and deliberate. "I may do so," Poirot said, rising. "Bonsoir, monsieur le Comte. Sleep well." As he left the dining car, Poirot's mind was a whirlwind of connections. The Comte's presence was no coincidence, and his denial of the cry was as unconvincing as the porter's. But the shadow he had seen, it had been the Comte. The man's build was similar, but the hat and coat suggested someone less ostentatious, someone who wished to remain unseen. Back in the first-class carriage, Poirot paused outside Catherine Gray's compartment. Number 9, the kind-hearted Englishwoman, had struck him as perceptive, her quiet demeanor hiding a sharp mind. He considered waking her, but decided against it. Instead, he returned to his own compartment, where he sat at the small writing desk. His notebook open before him, he jotted down the night's events, the cry, the shadow, the empty compartment, the cigarette case, the porter's unease, the Comte's evasions. Each was a thread in a tapestry of intrigue, but the pattern remained elusive. He closed the notebook, his resolve hardening. Tomorrow, he would watch closely Ruth Kettering, Derek, Morel, the Comte, even Catherine. Someone on this train was hiding a dangerous truth, and Poirot would not rest until he uncovered it. The train rattled on, its azure cars cutting through the night. Outside, the moon hung low, casting long shadows over the fields. Inside, Hercule Poirot sat, his little grey cells alight, satisfied that he had glimpsed the edge of a mystery as dark and winding as the tracks themselves. The following morning, the blue train hummed with a pretense of normalcy. Passengers gathered in the dining car, their voices bright with forced cheer. Ruth Kettering appeared, her face pale but composed, the heart of fire ruby gleaming at her throat. Poirot watched her from a corner table, noting the way her eyes darted to the door, as if expecting an unwelcome visitor. Derek Kettering sat alone, his jaw tight, a newspaper open but unread before him. Morel, his mistress, swept in, her crimson dress a stark contrast to the muted elegance of the car. She cast a venomous glance at Ruth, who ignored her, focusing instead on a conversation with Catherine Gray. The Comte de la Roche entered late, his smile as polished as ever, but Poirot caught the flicker of tension in his posture. The porter, Pierre, moved among the tables, serving coffee with a practiced smile. Poirot studied him, noting the faint tremor in his hands. Something had shaken the man. Something more than a late-night encounter with a curious detective. As breakfast concluded, Poirot approached Ruth, his manner gentle but direct. "Madame Kettering, a word, if you please. Last night I heard a cry. I fear it came from your compartment. Are you quite well?" Ruth's hand flew to her ruby, her fingers tightening around it. "A cry? I don't know, Monsieur Poirot. I slept soundly. Perhaps it was a dream, or another passenger." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her. Poirot nodded, not pressing further. "Of course, madame, but if you feel uneasy, Hercule Poirot is at your service." She offered a weak smile and excused herself, leaving Poirot to ponder her fear. He turned to Catherine, who had been watching the exchange. "Mademoiselle Gray, you have a keen eye. Did you, perhaps, hear anything unusual last night?" Catherine hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. "I thought I heard something, a thud, perhaps, or a voice, but it was so faint I dismissed it as the train's noise. Should I have been concerned?" Poirot's smile was encouraging. "Every detail, mademoiselle, is a piece of the puzzle. You will tell me if you recall anything more."
Oui.
She nodded, her expression earnest. Poirot left the dining car, his mind buzzing. The cry, the shadow, the empty compartment all pointed to a danger circling Ruth Kettering. The cigarette case with the initial K was a tantalizing clue, but he suspected it was a misdirection, a prop in a larger game. As the train sped toward Nice, Poirot resolved to keep a closer watch. The blue train, with its glittering facade, was a stage for deception, and he would not allow the curtain to fall until the truth was revealed. The shadow at midnight had set the mystery in motion, and Hercule Poirot, with his unerring instincts, was determined to follow it to its end. Chapter 4. The Crimson Discovery. The blue train stood motionless under the pale morning light of Nice, its azure carriages glinting like a polished sapphire against the platform's bustle. The journey from London had been one of elegance and whispers, but now, as passengers disembarked with the casual chatter of those expecting sun-drenched days on the Riviera, a shadow hung over the train. Hercule Poirot, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd, felt the air thicken with something unspoken. The rhythm of the station porters hauling luggage, the clatter of heels on stone, the distant hum of a Riviera breeze was disrupted by a piercing scream from carriage B. Poirot's head snapped toward the sound, his moustache twitching as his instincts flared. A young porter, his face ashen, stumbled from the carriage door, clutching the frame as if it alone kept him upright. "Monsieur, monsieur," he gasped, his voice cracking. "It's oh, mon Dieu, it's terrible." The crowd parted, murmurs rippling like waves, as Poirot moved swiftly, his polished shoes clicking with purpose. He reached the carriage door just as the train's chief guard, a stout man named Fournier, emerged, his usually ruddy face drained of color. "What is it, Monsieur Fournier?" Poirot asked, his tone calm but edged with steel. Fournier's eyes darted to the onlookers, then back to Poirot. "It's Madame Kettering, monsieur. She's dead. Murdered, I fear." Poirot's expression remained impassive, but his mind surged into motion. His little grey cells worry like a finely tuned engine. "Take me to her," he said, stepping into the carriage without waiting for a reply. The corridor was narrow, lined with polished wood and brass fittings that gleamed under the soft electric lights. The scent of lavender and polish lingered, but as Poirot approached compartment 7, a faint metallic temp cut through the air, a scent he knew too well. Inside, the scene was a grotesque tableau. Ruth Kettering, the American heiress whose unease Poirot had noted at Victoria Station, lay slumped on the velvet-upholstered seat, her once vibrant beauty marred by a brutal blow to her face. Blood had pooled beneath her, staining the rich carpet, a deep crimson. Her eyes, wide and unseeing, stared at the ceiling, and her hands lay limp, one clutching a crumpled handkerchief. The legendary heart of fire ruby, which had adorned her neck the previous evening, was gone, its absence as glaring as the wound that had ended her life. Poirot's gaze swept the compartment, cataloguing every detail with surgical precision. The window was closed, its latch secure. A small table held a half-empty glass of champagne, the bubbles long since flattened. A cigarette case, silver and engraved with a bold K, lay discarded near Ruth's feet, its lid slightly ajar. The air felt heavy, as if the compartment itself held its breath, guarding secrets. Fournier hovered at the door, wringing his hands. "I tried to wake her, monsieur. When we arrived, She didn't answer, so I entered. This is what I found. I didn't touch anything. Bon Poirot murmured, his eyes narrowing. You did well, Monsieur Fournier. Now, ensure no one enters this carriage until the police arrive, and fetch Mademoiselle Gray and Monsieur Kettering. Discreetly, if you please. As Fournier hurried off, Poirot knelt beside Ruth's body, careful not to disturb the scene. The blow to her face had been savage, disfiguring her delicate features, yet it was precise, suggesting intent beyond mere rage. He examined her hands. No defensive wounds, no signs of a struggle. Her silk dress, a deep emerald green, was pristine save for the blood that had seeped from her wound. Poirot's fingers hovered over the cigarette case, noting its weight and craftsmanship. He mused aloud. Kettering, perhaps, but too obvious. Nan. The compartment door creaked, and Catherine Gray appeared, her face pale but composed. Her simple wool coat and sensible hat contrasted sharply with the opulence around her, yet her eyes held a quiet strength. Monsieur Poirot, she said softly. Fournier said, you needed me. What's happened? Poirot rose, brushing his hands together. A tragedy, mademoiselle. Madame Kettering has been murdered, and her rubies stolen. I require your observations. You spoke with her last night, did you not? Catherine's hand flew to her mouth, but she steadied herself. Yes, in the dining car she was troubled. She mentioned her husband, Derek, and how things were strained. I didn't press her, but she seemed afraid of something or someone. Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming with interest. And did you see Monsieur Kettering near her compartment last night? Catherine hesitated, her brow furrowing. I'm not certain. I saw a man in the corridor, near her door, around 11. He was tall, like Derek, but the light was dim, and I didn't see his face clearly. I assumed it was him, but I could be mistaken. Assumptions, mademoiselle, are dangerous, Poirot said, his voice gentle but firm. Clarity is what we seek. Mercy for your candor. Before Catherine could respond, Derek Kettering stormed into the compartment, his handsome face twisted. With fury, his dark hair was disheveled, and his tailored suit bore the faint creases of a restless night. What the devil is going on, Poirot? He demanded. Fournier said Ruth's dead. Is this some kind of joke? Poirot's gaze sharpened, taking in Derek's agitation. No joke, monsieur. Your wife has been murdered, and this cigarette case, he gestured to the silver object, was found beside her. It bears the initial K. Yours, perhaps. Derek's eyes widened, then narrowed. That's mine. Yes, but I didn't leave it here. I was in my compartment all night, playing cards with Major Knight. Ask him. Someone's trying to pin this on me. Poirot tilted his head, his expression unreadable. We shall verify, Monsieur Kettering. For now, remain on the platform. The police will wish to speak with you. As Derek stormed out, muttering curses, Poirot turned back to the compartment, his mind racing. The cigarette case was a clumsy clue, too blatant to be accidental. A frame, perhaps, or a distraction. He examined the glass of champagne, noting a faint smudge on its rim lipstick, but not Ruth's shade. The handkerchief in her hand bore a monogram, RK, but its edges were frayed, as if torn in haste. Every detail was a thread in a tapestry Poirot was determined to unravel. The nice police arrived, led by Inspector Coe, a wiry man with a skeptical squint. Monsieur Poirot, he said, shaking his hand, your reputation precedes you. A messy business, this, robbery gone wrong. You think? Poirot's lips curled slightly. Nan, Inspector, a robbery, perhaps, but not gone wrong. The thief achieved, their anther ruby is gone. The murder, however, is another matter. It is too deliberate, too personal. We must look beyond the obvious. Coe raised an eyebrow but nodded. Very well, my men will secure the scene. What do you need? Access to the passengers' luggage, their statements, and a list of everyone who boarded or disembarked between Calais and Nice. And Inspector, ensure Madame Kettering's maid, Ada Mason, is questioned. She may know more than she admits. As Coe barked orders, Poirot stepped onto the platform, where the morning sun cast long shadows. The crowd had grown, their whispers buzzing like flies. Among them, he spotted Morel, Derek's mistress. Her flamboyant scarlet dress, a stark contrast to the sombre mood. Her eyes, rimmed with kohl, flicked toward the carriage, then away, as if guarding a secret. Poirot made a mental note to speak with her soon. He approached Catherine, who stood apart, clutching her handbag. Mademoiselle Gray, he said, you are observant. Tell me, did you notice anything unusual in the dining car last night, beyond Madame Kettering's demeanor? Catherine frowned, thinking there was a man, not a passenger, I think. He was speaking to the waiter, but he kept glancing at Ruth. He had a scar on his cheek, faint but noticeable. I didn't see him again after dinner. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A scar, you say? Most interesting. Merci, mademoiselle. You have given me a thread to pull. As Catherine nodded and stepped away, Poirot's gaze returned to the train. The blue train, so elegant and serene, had become a stage for violence and deception. The Heart of Fire, Ruby, with its cursed history, was the prize, but the murder was the puzzle. Was Derek Kettering, with his cigarette case so conveniently placed, the culprit, or was the case a plant meant to mislead? And what of the mysterious man with the scar, or Morel's guarded glances? Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft cough. Ada Mason, Ruth's maid, stood before him, her plain grey dress and downcast eyes giving her an air of meekness. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "I heard about Madame. It's awful. I saw something last night, but I was afraid to speak." Poirot's eyes locked onto hers, searching for truth. "Speak now, Mademoiselle Mason. What did you see?" She swallowed, glancing nervously at the crowd. "A man, in Madame's compartment, just after midnight. He was tall, with dark hair. I didn't see his face, but he moved quickly, like he didn't want to be seen, I thought. I thought it might be Monsieur Kettering, but I wasn't sure." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And why did you not report this immediately?" "I was scared, Monsieur. Madame was alive when I left her, at 10. I didn't want to cause trouble if it was nothing." "Trouble, mademoiselle, has found us regardless," Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm. "Return to your duties, but remain available. I will speak with you again." As Ada hurried off, Poirot stood alone, the weight of the mystery settling. Around him, the cigarette case, the lipstick-smudged glass, the torn handkerchief, the man with the scar. Ada's hesitant testimony were pieces of a puzzle that refused to align, yet Poirot felt a spark of satisfaction. The crime was complex, layered with misdirection, but his little grey cells were equal to the challenge. The blue train held its secrets, but Hercule Poirot would uncover them, one thread at a time. The platform buzzed with activity as the police cordoned off the carriage. Poirot's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the Mediterranean sparkled under the sun. The azure sea mirrored the train's hue, a reminder of the journey's promise and its betrayal. He turned back to the carriage, his resolve hardening. The crimson discovery had begun, and Poirot would not rest until the truth shone as brightly as the ruby that had vanished into the shadows. The station at Nice was a hive of controlled chaos. Passengers milled about, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease, while porters navigated around police officers, setting up barriers. Poirot, standing just outside carriage B, observed the scene with the detachment of a chessmaster studying a board. Each person was a piece, each movement a potential move in the game of murder. Inspector Coe approached, a notepad in hand. "We've taken statements from the dining car staff. Monsieur Poirot, the waiter, Pierre, confirms mademoiselle. Gray's Storia man with a scar was asking about the train's schedule last night. Not a passenger, he says. Likely a local, but we're checking." "Excellent," Inspector Poirot said, nodding. "And the luggage? Has anything unusual been found?" Coe shook his head. "Not yet. Most passengers are cooperative, but Monsieur Kettering is causing a fuss. Says we've no right to search his belongings." Poirot's lips quirked. "He protests, does he? Interesting. Permit me to speak with him again." He found Derek leaning against a lamppost, lighting a cigarette. With a shaking hand, the man's bravado had faded, replaced by a nervous edge. "Poirot," Derek said, exhaling a cloud of smoke, "this is madness. I didn't touch Ruth. We were done. Yes, but I wouldn't kill her. That cigarette case, it's mine, but I lost it days ago. Someone's setting me up." Poirot studied him, noting the sweat beating on his brow, despite the cool morning air. "Monsieur Kettering, the truth is like a fine wine, it reveals itself with time. Where were you between midnight and 2? "With Knighton, as I said. We played cards until 1, then I went to bed. My compartment's in carriage C, nowhere near Ruth's. And your cigarette case, when did you last see it?" Derek hesitated, his eyes flickering. 2 days ago, in London. I thought I'd misplaced it at the hotel. "I swear, Poirot, I didn't leave it in her compartment." Poirot nodded, his expression neutral. We shall see, monsieur. For now, assist the police. Resistance only clouds the truth. As Derek stalked off, Poirot's thoughts turned to Morel. She stood near a cafe across the platform, her scarlet dress drawing eyes like a beacon. She was speaking to a man Poirot didn't recognize, a wiry figure in a cheap suit, his face partially obscured by a hat. Their conversation was brief, and the man slipped into the crowd before Poirot could approach. Mademoiselle Morel, Poirot called, striding toward her. She turned, her smile practiced but brittle. A word, if you please. Of course. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice a sultry purr. Such a dreadful morning, Nan. Poor Ruth. Indeed, Poirot said, his eyes searching hers. You were close to Monsieur Kettering. Did you see him last night, perhaps near Madame Kettering's compartment? Morel's laugh was sharp, like breaking glass. Derek, he was with that dreary Major Knighton, playing cards. I was in my compartment, alone, reading. I saw nothing. Poirot tilted his head, noting the slight tremor in her hand as she adjusted her scarf. And the heart of fire. You admired it, no doubt. Who wouldn't? She said, her eyes flashing. But I don't steal, Monsieur Poirot. I take what's offered. Bean, Poirot said, stepping back. We shall speak again, mademoiselle. As Morel sauntered away, Poirot's mind churned. Her denial was too quick, her poise studied. The man she'd spoken to was he, the scarred stranger Catherine had seen. And what of Ada Mason's claim? Her story aligned with Catherine's, yet her fear seemed rehearsed. A performance for his benefit. Poirot returned to the carriage, where Coe's men were photographing the scene. He knelt again beside Ruth's body, his eyes lingering on the handkerchief. Its frayed edges suggested a struggle, yet her hands showed no signs of resistance. He lifted the glass of champagne, holding it to the light. The lipstick smudge was a vivid coral, unlike the soft pink Ruth had worn. Another woman had been here, or someone wanted him to think so. Inspector Poirot called. Have this glass analyzed for fingerprints and residue, and the handkerchief tested for traces of perfume or other substances. Coe nodded, scribbling in his notepad. You think the killer left more than the cigarette case? I think, Inspector, that the killer wishes us to see what they have left, Poirot said. But Hercule Poirot sees what is hidden. As the police continued their work, Poirot stepped back onto the platform, his gaze sweeping the crowd. The blue train, once a symbol of luxury, was now a crime scene, its passengers suspects in a deadly game. The ruby's theft was a motive, but the murder's brutality suggested something deeper: passion, betrayal, or revenge. Poirot's little grey cells hummed with possibilities, each clue a spark in the darkness. He spotted Major Knighton, Van Aldine's secretary, standing near the station entrance, his military bearing at odds with the nervous way he adjusted his tie. Poirot approached, his smile disarming. Major Knighton, a moment. You played cards with Monsieur Kettering last night? Oui. Knighton nodded, his jaw tight. Until about 1. He was in a foul mood, but he didn't leave my sight. Why? And you saw no one near Madame Kettering's compartment? No, Monsieur Poirot. I retired to my own compartment after our game. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Merci, Major. Your cooperation is most appreciated. As Knighton walked away, Poirot's mind raced. Knighton's alibi for Derek was solid, yet his demeanor suggested unease. Was he protecting his friend, or hiding something else? The web of lies was tightening, but Poirot felt a thrill of anticipation. The crimson discovery was not just a murder, it was a challenge, and Hercule Poirot was never one to back down. The sun climbed higher, casting a golden glow over Nice. The blue train stood silent, its secrets locked within. Poirot straightened his tie, his resolve unshaken. The truth was there, hidden in the shadows of the azure locomotive. He would find it, and the killer would face justice. For now, he turned toward the cafe, where Morel's scarlet dress had vanished into the crowd. The game was afoot, and Poirot was ready to play. Chapter 5. The grieving father's plaith. Morning sun spilled over the Riviera, painting Nice's cobblestone streets in hues of gold and amber. The blue train, now a silent monument to tragedy, rested at the station, its azure cars glinting like a sapphire under the Mediterranean sky. Inside the Hotel Negresco, where the passengers had been relocated, the air was thick with whispers and suspicion. Hercule Poirot sat in a plush armchair in the hotel's opulent lounge, his neatly waxed mustache twitching as he sipped at tisane, his sharp eyes scanning the room. The clatter of porcelain and the murmur of anxious voices did little to distract him from the puzzle at hand: Ruth Kettering's brutal murder and the disappearance of the legendary Heart of Fire ruby. Poirot's mind churned, his little grey cells arranging the fragments of the case like pieces of a mosaic. Ruth's death, discovered just hours ago, had sent shockwaves through the train's elite passengers. The cigarette case marked K, found in her compartment, pointed an accusing finger at her estranged husband, Derek Kettering. Yet Poirot, ever wary of the obvious, sensed the truth lay buried deeper, beneath layers of deception and half-truths. The morning's chaos had been interrupted by the arrival of Rufus Van Aldine, Ruth's father, whose grief was as palpable as the salt in the sea air. Van Aldine stormed into the lounge, his broad shoulders cutting through the crowd like a ship through waves. His face, weathered by years of ruthless business dealings, was now etched with a raw, unguarded sorrow. His steel-grey eyes locked onto Poirot, and without preamble, he strode forward, his voice low but commanding. "Monsieur Poirot, I need you." "My daughter," his voice cracked, a rare fissure in his otherwise unyielding demeanor. "My Ruth is gone. I want the truth, and I want it fast." Poirot rose, his movements precise, and gestured to a secluded alcove adorned with gilded mirrors and velvet drapes. "Monsieur Van Aldine, I am at your service," he said, his tone measured yet warm. "Let us speak privately, for the truth is a delicate thing, easily disturbed by careless ears." They settled into the alcove, Van Aldine's massive frame dwarfing the delicate chair. He leaned forward, his hands clenched into fists. "Ruth was my only child," he began, his voice a gravelly mix of pain and resolve. "She was headstrong, yes, but brilliant. That ruby, the Heart of Fire, was my gift to her, symbol of her strength. Now she's dead, and it's gone. I don't believe for a second that Derek did this, no matter what that damned cigarette case suggests. He's a fool, but not a killer." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. "You are certain of his innocence, monsieur? Yet the evidence, it points to him. Tell me, what do you know of your daughter's life, her troubles, that might illuminate this darkness?" Van Aldine exhaled, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Ruth's marriage to Derek was a mistake from the start. I warned her he was a charmer, but a leech. He burned through her money, ran around with that dancer, Morel. Ruth was planning to divorce him, but she was scared. Not of him, I think, but of something else. She wouldn't tell me what." His voice hardened. "That ruby, it's cursed. I bought it from a dealer in Istanbul, a man named Papa. He warned me it brought misfortune, but I laughed it off. Now I wonder." Poirot's fingers steepled beneath his chin. "A cursed jewel, you say? Most intriguing. And what of this Papapoulos? Did he know your daughter possessed it?" Van Aldine shook his head. "Not that I know of. But Ruth wore it openly, too openly, I told her. It drew eyes, greedy ones. She said she felt safe on the blue train, surrounded by luxury and people. I should have insisted she leave it in a vault." Poirot nodded, filing away the detail of the ruby's allure. "And who else knew of its value? Friends, servants, lovers, perhaps?" Van Aldine's jaw tightened. "The Comte de la Roche, Ruth's indiscretion from years ago. He's a snake, obsessed with rare gems. I cut him off when I found out, but he's here in Nice. I saw him skulking around the station yesterday. And then there's her maid, Ada Mason. Quiet girl, but Ruth trusted her. Too much, maybe." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "This Ada Mason, tell me of her." "She's been with Ruth for a year," Van Aldine said, efficient, unassuming. "Ruth liked her because she didn't gossip, but now I wonder if she saw something, or did something." Poirot made a mental note to investigate the maid. "Mercy, Monsieur Van Aldine, your candor is most valuable. I shall find the truth, for your daughter's sake. But I must ask, did Ruth have enemies, beyond her husband and this Comte?" Van Aldine hesitated, his gaze drifting to the window where the sea sparkled like a sheet of sapphires. "She was wealthy, beautiful, and stubborn. That's enough to make enemies in any circle, but no one specific comes to mind. I beg you, Poirot, don't let the police rush this. They're too quick to pin it on Derek." Poirot inclined his head. "The police, they see the surface. I, Hercule Poirot, see the depths. Rest assured, I shall leave no stone unturned." As Van Aldine left, his shoulders slumped under the weight of his grief. Poirot's mind raced. The ruby's curse, the Comte's greed, Derek's motive. And now the maid's potential secret search was a thread in a tapestry of intrigue. He decided to seek out Catherine Gray, the Englishwoman who had befriended Ruth on the train. Her quiet demeanor and sharp observations had impressed him in the dining car, and he suspected she held pieces of the puzzle. Catherine was in the hotel's garden, seated on a wrought-iron bench beneath a canopy of bougainvillea. Her auburn hair caught the sunlight, and her grey eyes, usually calm, flickered with unease as Poirot approached. "Miss Gray," he said, bowing slightly, "I hope I do not intrude. I seek your insight into the tragedy of Madame Kettering." Catherine's hands folded in her lap, her posture composed but her voice tinged with sorrow. "It's dreadful, Monsieur Poirot. Ruth was so vibrant, so alive. To think she's gone." She trailed off, her gaze distant. "You spoke with her in the dining car," Poirot prompted gently. "Did she seem afraid? Did she mention anyone who troubled her?" Catherine frowned, her fingers tracing the edge of her shawl. "She was nervous, yes. She talked about her marriage, how Derek's affairs humiliated her. She mentioned a man she saw watching her at Victoria Station, someone she didn't recognize. But what struck me was her maid, Ada." Ruth said Ada had been acting strangely, almost secretive, the past few days. Poirot's moustache twitched. "Secretive, you say? In what manner?" "She didn't elaborate," Catherine admitted, but Ruth seemed to trust her, yet there was a hesitation in her voice. "Oh, and I saw something odd that night. I couldn't sleep, so I stepped into the corridor. I saw Derek near Ruth's compartment, arguing with someone in hushed tones. I couldn't hear the words, and I didn't see who it was. I thought it improper to linger." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most interesting, mademoiselle. And this argument, did it seem heated, threatening?" "Not threatening, exactly," Catherine said, her brow furrowing. "More like desperate." Derek sounded frustrated, almost pleading. "I assumed it was about money. Ruth had told me he was in debt." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the detail. Derek's presence near Ruth's compartment was damning, yet Catherine's uncertainty about the second figure intrigued him. "Merci, Mademoiselle Gray. Your observations are most valuable. If you recall anything else, no matter how small, you will inform me." "We, of course," Catherine said, her voice steady. "I want to help. Ruth deserved better than this." As Catherine returned to her book, Poirot strolled toward the hotel's concierge desk, his polished shoes clicking on the marble floor. He needed to find Ada Mason. The maid's sudden prominence in both Van Eldine's and Catherine's accounts suggested she was more than a bystander. He inquired discreetly and learned that Ada was in her room, claiming to be unwell after the shock of Ruth's death. Poirot knocked on the door of room 214, a modest chamber compared to the suites of the train's wealthier passengers. A pale young woman with mousy brown hair and wide nervous eyes opened the door. "Monsieur Poirot." Ada Mason's voice trembled. I'm not feeling well. Can this wait?" "I regret, mademoiselle, but time is the enemy of truth," Poirot said, his tone firm yet kind. "May I enter?" "It is about your mistress, Madame Kettering." Ada stepped aside reluctantly, her hands twisting a handkerchief. The room was sparse, with a single suitcase and a neatly made bed. Poirot noted a faint scent of lavender, a contrast to the exotic perfume he'd detected on the torn scarf in Ruth's compartment. "Mademoiselle Mason," he began, settling into a chair, "you were close to Madame Kettering. Tell me, did you see anything unusual the night she died?" Ada's eyes darted to the floor. I don't know what you mean, sir. I was in my own compartment, sleeping, but I did see a man near her door earlier that evening. I couldn't see his face, but he was tall, with a dark coat. I thought he was just passing by." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "A man, you say? And you did not think to report this to the guard?" Ada flushed. "I didn't want to cause a fuss. Madame was particular about her privacy. I thought maybe it was her husband, or someone she knew." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. "And yet, you did not mention this to the police this morning. Why, mademoiselle?" "I was afraid," Ada burst out, her hands trembling. "I didn't want to get involved. Madame was good to me, and now she's gone, and I don't know what to do." Poirot studied her, noting the tremor in her voice, the way her eyes avoided his. "Fear, yes, but was it fear of discovery, or something else?" "Calm yourself, mademoiselle," he said soothingly. "Tell me, did Madame Kettering confide in you? About her ruby, or perhaps about someone who coveted it?" Ada shook her head vigorously. "She never spoke of it. not directly, but she was careful with it, always locking it in her jewelry case. She said it was her protection, her legacy. I don't know why anyone would hurt her for it. Poirot rose, adjusting his lapels. Mercy, Mademoiselle Mason, you have been most helpful. Rest now, but know that I may call upon you again. As he left the room, Poirot's mind buzzed. Ada's story was plausible, yet incomplete. The man she described could be anyone: Derek, the Comte, or even the mysterious Marquise, rumored to haunt Nice's underworld. But her hesitation, her quick denial of deeper knowledge, suggested she held a secret. Was she protecting someone, or herself? The day waned, and Poirot returned to the lounge, where the atmosphere had grown heavier. Passengers whispered behind gloved hands, their eyes darting to Derek Kettering, who sat alone at the bar, nursing a whiskey. Morel, his mistress, was nowhere to be seen, likely avoiding the scandal. Poirot approached Derek, who looked up with bloodshot eyes. "Monsieur Kettering," Poirot said, his voice neutral. "A word, if you please." Derek shrugged, his handsome face marred by exhaustion. "What do you want, Poirot?" "The police think I killed her. You probably do too." "I think only what the evidence permits," Poirot replied, sitting opposite him. "Your cigarette case was found in Madame Kettering's compartment. Can you explain this?" Derek's jaw clenched. "It's not mine. I don't use monogrammed cases, too flashy. Someone's trying to pin this on me. Ruth and I were done. Yes, but I didn't want her dead. I needed her money, not her blood." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And yet, you were seen near her compartment, arguing. Perhaps you sought to persuade her, or to take what was not yours." Derek slammed his glass down, drawing stares. "I was there, yes, but not to hurt her. I wanted to talk, to beg her, not to cut me off. She wouldn't listen. I left her alive, I swear." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And this argument, who else might have overheard it?" Derek hesitated. "Morel was lurking about. She's jealous, always, has been, and that maid Adashi was always skulking in the shadows, watching." Poirot thanked him, and withdrew, his mind alight with possibilities. Derek's denial was vehement, but not entirely convincing. Morel's absence was telling, and Ada's story grew more suspect with each retelling. The ruby, the murder, the train's confined world. It was a puzzle of human passions, greed chief among them. As evening fell, Poirot stood on the hotel's balcony, the sea breeze carrying the scent of salt and jasmine. The heart of fire was more than a jewel. It was a magnet for desire, a catalyst for betrayal. Ada Mason's nervous demeanor, Catherine's observation, and Van Aldine's plea all pointed to a truth just out of reach. Poirot felt a quiet satisfaction, not in solving the cassette, but in knowing he held the threads to unravel it. The maid's story, he decided, was the key. Tomorrow, he would press her further, for in her fear lay the shadow of the killer. The stars emerged above the Riviera, and Poirot retired to his room, his little grey cells humming. The blue train's mystery was far from solved, but he was on the scent, and the hunt was exhilarating. Chapter 6. The Comte's charm. The sun dipped low over the French Riviera, painting Nice's coastline in hues of amber and rose. As Hercule Poirot adjusted his pristine white gloves and stepped onto the cobbled street outside the café, the air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and the tang of sea salt, a heady mix that seemed to sharpen his senses. The blue train, now stationary at Nice's gleaming station, loomed in his Minder puzzle box of polished wood and secrets, its azure exterior hiding the grim truth of Ruth Kettering's murder. Poirot's little grey cells hummed with purpose, each clue a thread in a tapestry he was determined to unravel. Today, his focus was the Comte de la Roche, a man whose charm was as polished as a stolen heart of fire, ruby, and whose motives were as murky as the Mediterranean at dusk. The Café Éclat was a jewel of the Riviera, its outdoor tables, draped in crisp linen, silverware glinting under wrought iron lanterns. Poirot chose a seat near the edge, where he could observe the comings and goings of Nice's elite. The Comte had agreed to meet here. A public setting that Poirot suspected was chosen to disarm suspicion. The man was no fool. His reputation as a collector of rare gems and hearts was whispered in drawing rooms from Paris to Monte Carlo. Ruth Kettering, with her ill-fated ruby, had been his lover once, and Poirot knew that old passions could ignite new crimes. As he sipped a café au lait, Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the crowd. A group of American tourists laughed too loudly, their voices clashing with the soft clink of glasses. A local artist sketched at a nearby table, his charcoal scratching against paper in rhythmic bursts. Then, with the precision of a stage cue, the Comte de la Roche appeared. He was a vision of elegant style with dark hair swept back, a silk cravat knotted at his throat, and a smile that could charm a serpent. His eyes, a piercing green, met Poirot's with a flicker of amusement, as if the detective were a puzzle he relished solving. "Monsieur Poirot," the Comte said, his voice smooth as velvet, "it is a pleasure to meet a man whose reputation precedes him like a fine vintage." He extended a hand, his cufflink a sapphire carved into a crescent moon, catching the light. Poirot rose, bowing slightly. "Monsieur le Comte, the pleasure is mine. A man who appreciates beauty, as you do, must surely appreciate the beauty of truth." The Comte's smile tightened, just a fraction, as he took his seat. "Truth, Monsieur Poirot, is often less dazzling than it appears, but I am at your service. You wish to discuss the tragedy of Madame Kettering?" Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching as he leaned forward. "Oui, a tragedy indeed. A woman so vibrant, so adorned with the heart of fire, cut down in her prime. You knew her well, did you not?" The Comte's fingers traced the rim of his glass, a deliberate gesture. "Ruth was unforgettable. Our acquaintance was brief but intense. A woman of her spirit does not fade from memory, nor does her ruby," Poirot said, his tone light but his eyes unyielding. "A gem of such value, such history. It is said you have a passion for such treasures." The Comte laughed, a sound like crystal chiming. "Who does not love beauty, Monsieur Poirot? But I assure you, my interest in Ruth was not for her jewelry. Our time together ended long before this terrible journey." Poirot tilted his head, studying the man. The Comte's alibi was a delicate thing, woven from half-truths and charm. He claimed to have been in Monte Carlo the night of the murder, dining with a Russian duchess at the Casino de la Mer. Yet the duchess, when discreetly questioned by Poirot's contacts, had been vague about the hour of their partying. A gap in time, Poirot thought, like a crack in a porcelain vase, but telling. "Tell me, Monsieur le Comte," Poirot said, "did you board the blue train at any point, perhaps to bid adieu to an old friend?" The Comte's eyes narrowed, but his smile held. "I had no need to board that train. My business keeps me tethered to the Riviera's pleasures, not its tragedies. Surely you do not think me so clumsy as to involve myself in such a messy affair?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Clumsy, nan. But passion, monsieur, can make even the most refined man reckless. The heart of fire is a temptation few could resist." The Comte leaned back, his posture relaxed but his gaze sharp. "You flatter me with such suspicions, Monsieur Poirot, but I am a collector, not a thief. If you seek the ruby, look to those with less restraint." The conversation paused as a waiter delivered a tray of macarons, their pastel colors a stark contrast to the tension at the table. Poirot took one, nibbling thoughtfully. The Comte's deflection was masterful, but Poirot sensed a thread of unease beneath the polished surface. He decided to shift the angle of attack. "Perhaps you can assist me with another matter," Poirot said, brushing a crumb from his lapel. "The night of the murder, a man was seen leaving Madame Kettering's compartment, a man of refinement, perhaps not unlike yourself. Would you know of anyone on the train who might fit such a description?" The Comte's fingers stilled on his glass. "Many men of refinement traveled the blue train, Monsieur Poirot. It is, after all, a haven for the elite. You might ask Monsieur Derek Kettering. His entanglements are no secret." Poirot's eyes gleamed. The Comte's mention of Derek was too swift, too pointed, a diversion perhaps, or a calculated strike against a rival. Before he could press further, a commotion erupted at the café's entrance. A woman swept in, her presence like a gust of wind through a still room. Morel, Derek Kettering's mistress, was a vision of theatrical allure. Her scarlet dress clung to her curves, and her dark hair was piled high, adorned with a single ostrich feather. Her eyes, bright with fury, locked onto the Comte. The café's chatter dimmed as heads turned. "Comte de la Roche," she said, her voice carrying a venomous edge. "You have some nerve lounging here while the world whispers of murder." The Comte rose, his charm unshaken. "Mademoiselle Morel, your entrance is, as always, unforgettable. To what do I owe this pleasure?" Morel's lips curled into a sneer. "Don't play the innocent with me, you and your precious gems. Everyone, knows you'd sell your soul for that ruby, or perhaps you already have." Poirot's moustache twitched with interest. Morel's outburst was a gift, a crack in the facade of civility. He gestured to an empty chair. "Mademoiselle, please, join us. Your passion for truth is most illuminating." Morel hesitated, then sat, her movements sharp and deliberate. "I'm not here to play games, Monsieur Poirot. I know what people say about Derek, but he's no murderer. He was desperate. Yes, his debts are no secret, but he loved Ruth. In his way. If you want to know who wanted that ruby, ask this one." She jabbed a finger at the Comte. The Comte's smile never wavered. "Mademoiselle, your loyalty to Monsieur Kettering is touching, but your accusations are as baseless as they are dramatic. I suggest you temper your emotions before they lead you astray." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but commanding. "Mademoiselle Morel, you were on the blue train. Did you see the Comte there? Or perhaps you saw something else, something you've kept to yourself?" Morel's eyes flickered, a storm brewing behind them. "I saw plenty, Monsieur. The train was a nest of vipers, everyone watching everyone else. Derek was in the smoking car most of the night, drowning his sorrows. But I saw others moving about, shadows in the corridors. And yes, I saw a man near Ruth's compartment, but it wasn't Derek." Poirot's heart quickened. "A man, you say? Can you describe him?" Morel's gaze darted to the Comte, then away. Tall, well-dressed. He moved like he belonged there, but I couldn't see his face. It was dark, and I was distracted." The Comte chuckled. "A distracted witness is no witness at all. Mademoiselle, you waste Monsieur Poirot's time with such tales." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the Comte. "Every detail, mademoiselle, is a brushstroke on the canvas of truth. You say Monsieur Kettering was in the smoking car. Can anyone confirm this?" Morel's jaw tightened. "Ask the porter, Jacques. He brought Derek a bottle of cognac around midnight. Derek didn't leave until the train stopped in Nice." Poirot nodded, filing the information away. Morel's testimony, while biased, offered a new angle. If Derek was in the smoking car, he could not have been the man seen leaving Ruth's compartment. But Morel's hesitation, her glance at the Comte, suggested she knew more than she was saying, and the Comte's composure, while flawless, felt rehearsed. The conversation shifted as Morel excused herself, her departure as dramatic as her arrival. She paused at the café's edge, casting a final, venomous look at the Comte, before vanishing into the crowd. Poirot watched her go, his mind racing. Morel's accusation, whether true or spiteful, pointed to a tangle of motives: jealousy, greed, perhaps even betrayal. "Monsieur le Comte," Poirot said, turning back to his companion, "you are a man of many acquaintances. Have you heard of a figure known as the Marquis, a thief with a taste for jewels, I am told?" The Comte's expression remained serene, but his fingers tightened on his glass. "A name that floats on the wind. Monsieur Poirot, the Riviera is full of such legends. If this Marquis exists, he is clever enough to elude even you, I think." Poirot smiled, unperturbed. "Cleverness, monsieur, is no match for method. The truth, like a fine wine, reveals itself in time." As the Comte rose to leave, his parting words carried a hint of challenge. "Then I wish you luck, Monsieur Poirot, but beware, the truth you seek may be more dangerous than you imagine." Poirot watched him go, his silhouette blending into the Riviera's twilight. The café's lanterns flickered, casting shadows that danced like secrets. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the fragments: Morel's accusation, the Comte, slippery alibi, the mysterious man in the corridor. The heart of fire was more than a gem. It was a magnet for desire, drawing out the darkest impulses of those around it. He paid the bill and stepped into the evening, the sea breeze cooling his brow. The Comte was a master of deflection, but Poirot sensed a truth circling, like a hawk, above prey. Morel's words about Derek's debts and her cryptic hint about the man near Ruth's compartment were threads he would tug, and the mention of the Marquis, that elusive thief, added a new layer to the puzzle. Was the Comte involved, or was he a convenient scapegoat for Morel's wrath? As Poirot strolled back toward the station, the blue train's azure cars gleamed in the distance, a silent witness to the night's secrets. He paused, his hand resting on his cane, and murmured to himself, "The little grey cells, they are awake. The truth, it is close, but it dances just beyond my grasp." No matter, Hercule Poirot does not chase. He waits, and the truth comes to him. Chapter 7. the scent of deception. The blue train, now motionless at Nice's bustling station, stood like a grand dame under the Mediterranean sun, its azure carriages gleaming with an air of silent secrets. Hercule Poirot, his sharp eyes scanning the platform, felt the weight of the mystery deepen. Ruth Kettering's brutal murder and the theft of the Heart of Fire. Ruby had transformed the train from a vessel of luxury into a labyrinth of lies. The air was thick with suspicion, and Poirot's little grey cells hummed with purpose. He stepped back into the carriage where Ruth had met her end, the velvet curtains drawn to mute the sun's glare. The compartment, though tidied by the staff, still held an eerie stillness, as if the walls themselves whispered of the crime. Poirot's gloved fingers traced the edge of a mahogany panel, his mind replaying the clues. The cigarette case marked K, the disfigured face of the heiress, and the absence of the ruby that had once burned like a star against her throat. But it was a new discovery that morning that set his senses, a lighter torn silk scarf, half hidden beneath the fold of a cushioned seat, its delicate fabric exuding an exotic perfume that seemed to linger like a ghost. The scent was unmistakable, jasmine and amber, with a hint of something spicier, perhaps cardamom. It was not the kind of fragrance one forgot, nor one that belonged to the practical Ruth Kettering. Poirot lifted the scarf, its pale gold threads catching the light, and noted a small tear along one edge, as if it had been caught in haste. His mind darted to Morel, the tempestuous dancer and Derek Kettering's mistress, whose flamboyant style matched such a luxurious accessory. Could she have been here, in this very compartment, on the night of the murder? The thought was tantalizing, but Poirot knew better than to leap to conclusions. He tucked the scarf into an evidence bag, his movements precise, and resolved to confront the woman whose presence seemed to weave through this mystery like a scarlet thread. The Riviera sun was relentless as Poirot made his way to the Hotel where Morel had taken up residence after the train's arrival in Nice. The hotel's grand facade, with its pink domes and white marble, was a fitting stage for the dancer's dramatic persona. Poirot found her in the hotel's palm-shaded courtyard, reclining on a wicker chaise longue, a glass of chilled absinthe in her hand. Her dress, a flowing creation of emerald silk, shimmered like the sea beyond, and her dark eyes flashed with a mix of defiance and curiosity as she saw him approach. "Monsieur Poirot," she purred, her French accent curling round the words. Like smote, to what do I owe this pleasure, or is it a displeasure? She tilted her head, her lips curving into a smile that was more challenge than warmth. Poirot bowed slightly, his moustache twitching as he took the seat opposite her. "Mademoiselle Morel, I am a man who seeks only the truth, and I believe you may hold a piece of it. May I?" He gestured to the scarf, now carefully folded in his hand. Her eyes narrowed, but the smile remained. A scarf, how charming! A gift, perhaps, for the great detective. Not a gift, mademoiselle, but a clue, found in the compartment of Madame Kettering, where she met her tragic end. The scent, I believe, is yours. Morel's fingers tightened around her glass, though her face betrayed no panic. "You think me so careless, Monsieur Poirot, to leave my belongings at a crime scene?" She laughed, a low, throaty sound. "Many women wear jasmine. It is the perfume of the Riviera, Nan." Perhaps Poirot conceded, his voice calm but unyielding. "Yet this scarf, with its tear and its distinctive fragrance, tells a story. I wish to know if it is yours, and why it was found where a woman was murdered." Morel leaned forward, her gaze locking with his. "You accuse me, then, of what? Murder, theft, or simply bad taste in leaving my accessories behind?" Her tone was mocking, but Poirot caught the flicker of unease in her eyes, like a shadow passing over still water. "I accuse no one, mademoiselle. I inquire, were you in Madame Kettering's compartment that night?" She sipped her absinthe, her movements deliberate. "Very well, I will humor you. Yes, I visited Ruth. We spoke, as women do, about matters of the heart. She was distressed. Her marriage, you know, was a cage, and Derek was no gentleman. I left her alive, Monsieur Poirot. That is the truth." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And what time was this visit, mademoiselle?" "Late, perhaps 11. I don't keep a clock. When I'm consoling a friend." Her voice dripped with sarcasm, but Poirot noted the vagueness of her answer. "And the scarf? Did it perhaps slip from your neck in the heat of your conversation?" Morel's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "If it is mine, I must have lost it earlier. The train is a crowded place, Nan. Things are misplaced." She waved a hand dismissively, but Poirot sensed she was withholding something vital. He rose, bowing again. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your candor is appreciated, though I suspect there is more to your story. I will find it, rest assured." As he walked away, the scent of jasmine lingered in his mind, a thread he would follow to its end. Back at the station, Poirot sought out Catherine Grey, whose quiet intelligence had impressed him. She was in the waiting room, her simple grey dress a stark contrast to the opulence around her. She looked up from her book, her blue eyes calm but curious. "Monsieur Poirot, have you found something new?" she asked, her voice soft but direct. "Perhaps." "Mademoiselle Grey, tell me, do you recall seeing Mademoiselle Morel on the night of the murder? Perhaps near Madame Kettering's compartment?" Catherine frowned, her brow furrowing as she thought. I'm not certain. It was late, and I was in my own compartment, but I did hear voices, a woman's voice, sharp, like an argument. I thought it might be Morel, but I couldn't swear to it." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her words. "And the scent of perfume, mademoiselle. Did you notice anything unusual in the corridor?" Catherine's eyes widened slightly. "Now that you mention it, yes. There was a strong scent, like flowers, but heavier. I thought it was just the train's air, but it was near Ruth's compartment." "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." Poirot's mind raced. The scarf, the perfume, evasive answers all pointed to her presence at the scene. Yet her denial of murder rang oddly sincere. Was she protecting someone, or was she playing a deeper game? That evening, Poirot dined alone at a small café overlooking the Promenade des Anglais, the sea sparkling under the stars. His thoughts turned to the other passengers. Derek Kettering, with his cigarette case and financial woes, remained a suspect, though the case's initials now seemed less conclusive. The Comte de la Roche, with his obsession for gems, had a motive but a flimsy alibi. And then there was Ada Mason, Ruth's maid, whose nervous demeanor during her interview had not escaped Poirot's notice. Could she be connected to the scarf, or was she merely a witness to something she feared to reveal? As he sipped his tisane, a figure approached his table, a man in a tailored suit, his face half hidden by the brim of a fedora. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low and accented with a hint of Greek. "A word, if you please." Poirot recognized him at once. Demetrius Papopoulos, the antiques dealer with ties to Nice's underworld. "Monsieur Papopoulos, what brings you to my humble table?" Papopoulos sat, his dark eyes scanning the café. "I hear you ask questions about a certain Marquis, a dangerous name to invoke." Monsieur Poirot's mustache twitched. "The Marquis is a thief, none, and the Heart of Fire is a prize worth stealing. Do you know something of this man?" Papopoulos leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Marquis is no ordinary thief. He is a shadow, a name whispered in fear. I tell you this, he was on the blue train, but whether he killed the woman, I cannot say. Be careful, monsieur. Some secrets are better left buried." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the scarf, monsieur, does it belong to this marquise?" Papop chuckled, a dry sound. "A scarf? No, that is a woman's touch. But the marquise, he leaves no such traces. Look to the dancer. Perhaps she is not what she seems." As Papopoulos slipped away into the night, Poirot felt a surge of satisfaction. The scarf was narrowing his suspect pool, but the mention of the Marquis added a new layer to the puzzle. Was Morel working with this elusive thief, or was she merely a convenient distraction? The perfume, the torn silk, the whispered name were pieces of a mosaic that Poirot was determined to complete. The next morning Poirot returned to the blue train, now under police guard. He stood in Ruth's compartment, the scarf in his hand, and closed his eyes, letting the scent guide his thoughts. He imagined Morel here, her emerald dress sweeping the floor, her voice sharp with anger or desperation. Had she come to confront Ruth about Derek, or was it the ruby that drew her, its fiery glow a temptation too great to resist? He opened his eyes and examined the tear in the scarf more closely. It was not a clean cut, but a jagged rip, as if caught on something sharp, a piece of jewelry, perhaps, or the edge of a table. He inspected the compartment's furniture, his fingers brushing over a small, ornate table bolted to the wall. There, caught in a tiny splinter of wood, was a single gold thread, matching the scarf. It was a small clue, but to Poirot it was a beacon. Morel had been here, and the tear suggested a struggle, or at least a moment of carelessness. He sought out The train's steward, a nervous man named Pierre, who had been on duty the night of the murder. Monsieur Pierre, Poirot began, his tone gentle but firm. Did you see Mademoiselle Morel near Madame Kettering's compartment that night? Pierre shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the side. I saw many passengers, monsieur. It was a busy night, but Mademoiselle Morel, with her striking presence, would not go unnoticed. Speak plainly, if you please. Pierre swallowed hard. I saw her. Yes, near midnight. She was in the corridor, outside Madame Kettering's door. She seemed agitated. I thought she was visiting a friend. And did you hear anything? A cry, perhaps, or raised voices? Pierre hesitated, then nodded. A cry, soft, like someone was surprised. But I thought it was nothing serious. I did not interfere. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the information. Merci, monsieur. You have been most helpful. As the day wore on, Poirot's thoughts churned like the waves against the Riviera's shore. Morel's presence in the compartment, confirmed by the scarf and Pierre's account, was damning. Yet her denial of murder gnawed at him. She was a woman of passion, capable of jealousy, but was she capable of such a brutal act? And if not, her, who? The Marquis, elusive and cunning, loomed in the background, but the scarf pointed to a woman's hand. He decided to test Morel once more, this time with a different approach. He arranged to meet her at a secluded garden near the hotel, where bougainvillea spilled over stone walls, and the air was heavy with the scent of roses. Morel arrived, her demeanor wary, her eyes searching his face for intent. Mademoiselle Poirot began, holding up the scarf. This was found where Madame Kettering died. The tear, the perfume, they are yours. I ask you once more, what happened in that compartment? Morel's face hardened, but her voice was steady. I told you, I visited Ruth. We argued, yes, about Derek. She was going to ruin him. You see, with her divorce and her father's money, I grabbed her arm, and perhaps my scarf caught on something. But I did not kill her, Monsieur Poirot. I swear it. Poirot studied her, his eyes piercing. And the ruby, mademoiselle, did you see it that night? Her hesitation was brief but telling. It was on her neck, glowing like a curse. I left it there. If it is gone, someone else took it. Poirot leaned closer, his voice low. And who might that someone be? Mademoiselle. A name, perhaps. Morel's lips parted, then closed. I cannot say, I don't know. But Poirot saw the flicker in her eyes, the same unease he had noted before. She was protecting someone or something. He let the silence stretch, then nodded. Very well, mademoiselle. But know this, Hercule Poirot does not rest until the truth is revealed. As she walked away, her emerald dress blending into the garden's shadows, Poirot felt a quiet satisfaction. The scarf had confirmed Morel's presence, and her evasions suggested she knew more than she admitted. The puzzle was far from complete, but the pieces were falling into place. The scent of deception was strong, and Poirot was determined to follow it to its source, whether it led to Morel, the Marquis, or another shadow lurking in the azure night. Chapter 8. The Marquis' enigma. The Riviera sun hung low over Nice, casting a golden haze across the Promenade des Anglais, where the azure sea lapped lazily against the pebbled shore. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and salt, a heady blend that mingled with the chatter of cafe patrons and the clink of aperitif glasses. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a cream linen suit, his moustache waxed to a razor's edge, sat at a corner table at Café de l'Étoile, his sharp green eyes scanning the bustling street. The blue train, now stationary in Nice's sidings, was a silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded within its opulent carriages. Ruth Kettering's brutal murder and the disappearance of the heart of Fire Ruby. Poirot's little grey cells hummed with purpose. For the whispers of a notorious figure the Marquis had begun to weave through the case like a silken thread. The investigation had reached a fever pitch. Ruth's death, her face marred by a savage blow, had shocked the Riviera's elite, and the missing ruby, a gem steeped in legend and curse, had set tongues wagging from Monte Carlo to Antibes. Poirot had already uncovered tantalizing clues: a torn silk scarf scented with exotic perfume, pointing to Morel, Derek Kettering's tempestuous mistress, a cigarette case in Ruth's compartment, initially thought to be Derek's, but now a mystery of its own, and the cryptic behavior of Ada Mason, Ruth's maid, whose story of a man in Ruth's compartment seemed increasingly dubious. Yet it was. The name of the Marquis, a phantom jewel thief whose exploits were the stuff of Parisian gossip. that now consumed Poirot's thoughts. The Marquis was a shadow, a name whispered in the underbelly of Europe's high society. No one knew his face, only his methods, audacious, precise, and always cloaked in anonymity. The theft of the Heart of Fire bore his hallmarks, a crime to clean, too calculated to be the work of a mere opportunist. But was the theft connected to Ruth's murder, or were there two predators aboard the blue train? Poirot sipped his tisane, its chamomile warmth soothing his senses, and considered the puzzle. The cigarette case, found tucked beneath a cushion in Ruth's compartment, was a pivotal clue. Initially, its K engraving had pointed to Derek Kettering, but closer inspection revealed no initials at all, just a stylized flourish that could belong to anyone or no one. Poirot's musings were interrupted by the arrival of Demetrius Papopoulos, a Greek antiques dealer whose shop in Nice was a treasure trove of rare artifacts and darker secrets. Papopoulos was a man of contradictions. His rotund frame and jovial smile masked a mind as sharp as a stiletto, and his connections to the criminal underworld were as renowned as his collection of Byzantine relics. Poirot had arranged to meet him here, in the open, where the clatter of café life would cloak their conversation from prying ears. "Monsieur Poirot," Papopoulos said, easing into the chair opposite with the grace of a man accustomed to luxury. His silk cravat gleamed in the sunlight, and his fingers, adorned with a single emerald ring, toyed with a silver cigarette holder. "You honor me with your presence, but I suspect this is no social call." Poirot's smile was polite, his eyes unyielding. "You are correct, Monsieur Papopoulos. I seek information, and you, I am told, are a man who hears the whispers of the world." Papopoulos chuckled, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate the table. "Whispers, yes, but they are costly, my friend. What do you seek?" "The Marquis," Poirot said simply, watching the dealer's face for the slightest flicker. "I am told he was aboard the blue train when Madame Kettering met her tragic end. A coincidence? Perhaps." Papopoulos's smile faltered, his fingers tightening around the cigarette holder. "The Marquis," he murmured, as if tasting the name. "A dangerous name to invoke, Monsieur Poirot. He is a ghost, a myth to some. But myths have a way of leaving footprints, do they not?" "Precisely," Poirot replied, leaning forward. "And I believe his footprints are all over this case. The ruby, the Heart of Fire, is gone. A thief of his caliber would not resist such a prize. Tell me, what do you know of his movements?" Papopoulos lit a cigarette, the smoke curling like a serpent between them. "The Marquis is no ordinary thief," he said, his voice low. "He does not steal for greed, but for the thrill, the art of it. They say he was in Nice last week, meeting with a fence in the old town. A man in a grey overcoat, seen near the station the night the blue train arrived. But whether he was aboard," he shrugged, a gesture that said everything and nothing. Poirot's mind seized on the detail. A man in a grey overcoat. He recalled the shadowy figure on Victoria Station's platform, watching Ruth Kettering with predatory intent. Could it be the same man? "This fence," Poirot pressed. "Do you know his name?" Papopoulos's eyes gleamed with amusement. "You ask much, Monsieur, but for you, I will share a name: Leon Duval, a small-time dealer in stolen goods, operating out of a back alley near the Cours Salier. If the Marquis was involved, Duval would know." Poirot nodded, committing the name to memory. "And the cigarette case, a curious item, found in Madame Kettering's compartment. No initials, yet it is finely crafted. A piece worthy of a collector, perhaps." Papopoulos's expression tightened, a fleeting shadow crossing his face. "Many such cases exist," he said carefully. "They are common among men of taste. But if it was in her compartment, perhaps it was a gift or a plant." The word plant struck Poirot like a bell. A planted clue suggested calculation, a deliberate attempt to mislead. His thoughts raced back to the suspects. Derek Kettering, whose financial ruin made him a prime candidate for theft. Morel, whose jealousy could drive her to violence. The Comte de la Roche, whose obsession with gems was no secret. And Ada Mason, whose nervous demeanor hinted at hidden motives. But the Marquis, if he was aboard, added a new dimension: a professional whose presence could explain the theft, if not the murder. Poirot thanked Papopoulos, slipping a generous bank across the table as a gesture of goodwill. The dealer pocketed it with a nod, his smile returning. "Be careful, Monsieur Poirot," he said, as he rose. "The Marquis does not take kindly to those who hunt him, and Nice is a city of shadows." As Papopoulos departed, Poirot's gaze drifted to the sea, its waves glinting like the facets of a gem. The Marquis' enigma was taking shape, but the puzzle was far from complete. He resolved to find Léon Duval, but first, he needed to revisit the Blue Train, where the cigarette case awaited further scrutiny. The train, now under guard at Nice's railway yard, was a silent monument to the crime. Poirot gained access with a flash of his credentials and a charming smile to the weary gendarme on duty. The first-class carriage, once alive with laughter and champagne, now felt like a mausoleum, its air heavy with the memory of death. Poirot made his way to Ruth's compartment, its door sealed with police tape, which he carefully lifted. Inside, the scene was as he remembered: the plush velvet seat, the mahogany table, the champagne glass with its faint lipstick smudge. He retrieved the cigarette case from the evidence bag, provided by the local police at his request. It was a thing of beauty silver, engraved with a delicate filigree pattern, but devoid of any personal mark. Poirot turned it over in his gloved hands, his mind racing. Papapose's suggestion of a plant gnawed at him. If the case was not Derek's, whose was it? And why leave it behind? As he examined the case, a faint click caught his attention. A hidden catch, concealed in the filigree, sprang open under his touch, revealing a tiny compartment. Inside was a single strand of hair, blonde, fine, and unmistakably feminine. Poirot's heart quickened. The hair was too light to be Ruth's auburn locks, or Morel's dark tresses. Could it belong to Ada Mason, the maid, or another player? In this intricate game, his investigation was interrupted by a soft knock at the compartment door. Catherine Grey stood there, her grey coat a stark contrast to the carriage's opulence. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "I hope I'm not intruding. I saw something the night of the murder, and I've only just realized its importance." Poirot gestured for her to enter, his curiosity piqued. Catherine's calm demeanor and sharp observations had already marked her as a valuable ally. "Speak, Mademoiselle Grey," he said, closing the cigarette case with a snap. "Every detail, no matter how small, is a piece of the mosaic." Catherine hesitated, her fingers twisting the strap of her handbag. "It was just before midnight, when the train slowed near Lyon. I couldn't sleep, so I was reading by the window. I saw a man in the corridor, moving quickly, as if he didn't want to be seen. He wore a grey overcoat, and his face was hidden by a scarf. He paused outside Mrs. Kettering's compartment, then slipped inside. I thought little of it at the time. Perhaps he was a steward, but now—" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A grey overcoat, you say? Très intéressant. Did you see him leave?" Catherine shook her head. "No. The train jolted, and I looked away. When I glanced back, the corridor was empty." Poirot's mind raced. The man in the grey overcoat, seen by Catherine and mentioned by Papopoulos, was no coincidence. Was he the Marquis, stealing the ruby under cover of darkness? Or was he the murderer, striking Ruth down in a moment of violence? The blonde hair in the cigarette case added another layer, suggesting a woman's involvement, perhaps an accomplice. "Thank you, Mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice warm but firm. "Your observation may be the key to unlocking this enigma. But tell me, why come forward now?" Catherine's cheeks flushed. "I overheard the police talking about the Marquis. I thought, perhaps what I saw could help. I don't want to see an innocent man like Mr. Kettering blamed unjustly." Poirot nodded, impressed by her integrity. "Rest assured, mademoiselle, I seek only the truth, and I shall find it." As Catherine departed, Poirot pocketed the cigarette case, its hidden compartment a secret he would guard for now. He left the train and headed for the Cours Salia, the old town's vibrant market square, where Léon Duval plied his illicit trade. The streets of Nice were a labyrinth of narrow alleys, their walls adorned with peeling posters, and the scent of fresh-baked bread mingling with the tang of the sea. Poirot navigated the maze with ease, his small frame slipping through the crowds like a shadow. Duval's shop was a nondescript storefront, its windows cluttered with tarnished silverware and faded paintings. Inside, the air was musty, the shelves groaning under the weight of curiosities. Duval himself was a wiry man with a ferret-like face, his eyes darting nervously as Poirot introduced himself. "I am Hercule Poirot," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "I seek information about a certain gentleman known as the Marquis. I am told you have done business with him." Duval's hands trembled as he adjusted a stack of books. "I don't know no Marquis," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I'm just a dealer, monsieur. Honest trade, that's all." Poirot's smile was disarming, but his eyes were steel. "Come now, Monsieur Duval. A man of your connections does not survive in Nice without hearing things. A ruby, the heart of fire, was stolen from the blue train. If you know nothing, perhaps the police would be interested in your other dealings." Duval's face paled, and he gestured for Poirot to follow him to a back room, its walls lined with locked cabinets. "All right," he muttered, closing the door. "I heard about the ruby. Word is, it's already out of Nice, passed to a buyer in Marseille. The Marquis don't keep prizes long. He moves fast, leaves no trace." "And was he on the train?" Poirot pressed, his voice low. Duval hesitated, then nodded. "I heard he was a passenger maybe, or someone who slipped on and off at a stop. He's clever, monsieur. Wears disguises, changes his voice. Could have been anyone." Poirot's mind flashed to the suspects. Derrick, with his desperate need for money. The Comte, with his love of gems. Major Knighton, whose stiff demeanor hid unknown depths. Or even Ada Mason, whose nervous glances suggested more than mere fear. The Marquis could be among them, more none of them. And this Poirot produced the cigarette case, holding it up to the dim light. "Have you seen its like before?" Duval's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition crossing his face before he masked it. "Common enough," he said quickly. "Lots of gents carry those. Nothing special." Poirot knew a lie when he saw one, but he pressed no further. Duval was a small fish, and pushing him too hard might scare off the bigger prey. He thanked the dealer and left, the cigarette case heavy in his pocket, its blonde hair a tantalizing clue. As evening fell, Poirot returned to his hotel, the Negresco, its pink dome glowing against the twilight sky. In his suite, he spread his notes across a table, each clue a piece of the puzzle: the grey overcoat, the cigarette case, the blonde hair, the Marquis's rumored presence. The theft of the ruby was a crime of precision, but Ruth's murder was brutal, emotional, a contrast that suggested two perpetrators, or a single mind playing a double game. He recalled Catherine's account of the man in the grey overcoat, and Papopoulos's hint of a meeting in Nice. The Marquis was close, perhaps closer than anyone realized. But was he the murderer, or merely a thief seizing an opportunity? The cigarette case, with its hidden compartment, suggested a deeper layer, a clue planted to mislead, or a mistake by a careless thief. Poirot leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. The Marquis' enigma was a riddle wrapped in shadows, but he felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing he had peeled back another layer. The cigarette case was not Derrick's, and the blonde hair pointed to a woman yet to be identified. The Marquis, whether passenger or phantom, was a piece of the puzzle that could not be ignored. As the Riviera night deepened, its stars mirroring the sea's sparkle, Poirot gazed out his window. The azure horizon, a reminder of the train that had carried this mystery into his life. "A bean," he murmured. "The Marquis, he plays his game, but Hercule Poirot plays a better one." Chapter 9. Catherine's intuition. The blue train, now stationary in Nice, stood like a gleaming relic of opulence against the backdrop of the Riviera's sun-drenched coast. Its azure cars, once alive with the rhythm of travel, now seemed to hold their breath, as if guarding the secrets of Ruth Kettering's murder. Hercule Poirot stood on the platform, his polished shoes glinting in the morning light, his mustache impeccably trimmed despite the weight of the case pressing on his little grey cells. The air carried the temps of salt and the faint hum of the city waking. But Poirot's focus was inward, piecing together the mosaic of clues that had emerged since Ruth's body was found. Her face marred and the heart of fire, Ruby vanished. Catherine Grey, the unassuming Englishwoman, whose quiet perceptiveness had caught Poirot's attention, stood nearby, her grey eyes scanning the bustling station. Her modest navy coat and simple hat belied the sharpness of her mind, a quality Poirot had come to value. She had become an unexpected ally, her observations cutting through the fog of deception that enveloped the train's passengers. Today, she had agreed to accompany Poirot on a walk through Nice's old town, where he hoped to test a new theory sparked by her latest recollection. Fleeting glimpse of a boy, disembarking at a rural station during the train's journey, a figure that seemed oddly out of place. The morning was crisp, the cobblestone streets of Nice alive, with vendors hawking flowers and fresh bread. Poirot, ever the gentleman, offered Catherine his arm as they navigated the narrow alleys, the scent of lavender and espresso mingling in the air. "Mademoiselle Grey," he began, his voice smooth but laced with intent. "Your observation of this boy intrigues me. It is not often that one notices what others overlook. Tell me again, if you please, exactly what you saw." Catherine's brow furrowed, her memory straining to recapture the moment. "It was at that small station, Leon, I think, in the early hours. The train stopped briefly, and I couldn't sleep, so I was at my window. I saw a young man, or so I thought, step off the train. He was slight, dressed in a cap and loose jacket, carrying a small bag, but something was off. His movements were too careful, almost rehearsed, like he was trying not to be noticed. And his face, when the platform light caught it, it looked softer than a boy's, almost feminine." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Feminine, you say? And this bag, did it seem heavy, as if it carried something of value?" Catherine nodded slowly. "Yes, he held it close, not casually. I thought it odd at the time, but with everything that's happened—" Her voice trailed off, her gaze drifting to a street performer juggling oranges. The crowd's laughter, a stark contrast to the gravity of their conversation. Poirot's mind was already racing. The boy could be a key, a thread connecting the murder to the missing ruby. His thoughts turned to Ada Mason, Ruth's maid, whose nervous demeanor and vague account of seeing a man in Ruth's compartment had raised his suspicions. Could Ada have been the figure Catherine saw, disguised to slip away with the stolen gem? The idea was bold, but Poirot thrived on the bold, his little grey cells weaving possibilities into patterns. They paused at a small cafe, its rotterun table spilling onto the sidewalk. Poirot ordered 2 espressos, the bitter aroma grounding his thoughts. "Mademoiselle," he said, leaning forward, "your intuition is a gift. This boy may be more than a passenger. I suspect a disguise, a clever ruse to escape with, the heart of fire. Tell me, have you noticed anything else about Ada Mason? Anything that might confirm or refute this theory?" Catherine sipped her espresso, her expression thoughtful. "Ada's always been in the background, almost invisible. But now that you mention it, there was something at dinner that first night. Ruth was tense, and Ada kept hovering, not just serving but watching, like she was waiting for something. And when Ruth touched her ruby, Ada's eyes followed her hand. It wasn't greed, exactly, it was more like fear, or maybe anticipation." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his growing excitement. "Fear and anticipation, mademoiselle, are 2 sides of the same coin. They suggest knowledge, perhaps complicity. We must learn more about this Ada Mason. Her past, her motives, her very identity may hold the key." Leaving the cafe, they made their way to the local police station, where Poirot had arranged to meet Inspector Henry Fournier, a wiry Frenchman with a penchant for detail almost rivaling Poirot's own. The station was a modest affair, its stone walls cooled against the Riviera heat. Fournier greeted them with a brisk nod, his dark eyes assessing Catherine with curiosity. "Monsieur Poirot, you bring a companion. Is Mademoiselle Gray a witness or a detective in her own right?" Poirot smiled. "She is both, Inspector. Her observations have illuminated paths I might have overlooked. Now, tell me, have you uncovered anything about Ada Mason?" Ruth Maid Fournier produced a thin file, its edges worn from handling. "Mason is an enigma, monsieur. Her references are impeccable, too impeccable, perhaps. She's been with Ruth Kettering for 2 years, always described as loyal and discreet. But her past before that, sparse. A governess in London, a seamstress in Bath, and before that, nothing. It's as if she appeared fully formed." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A seamstress, you say? A profession that requires skill with costumes, with transformations, and her accent, did you note it?" Fournier nodded. "English, but polished, as if learned rather than natural. She claims to be from Dorset, but her speech lacks the regional lilt one might expect." Catherine interjected, her voice soft but firm. "Could she have been an actress? Someone trained to slip into roles, to change her voice, her manner?" Poirot turned to her, delighted. "Mademoiselle, you anticipate my thoughts. An actress, yes, would explain much the careful movements, the ability to vanish into a role. Inspector, I request access to any theatrical records, perhaps from London or Paris. If Ada Mason is not who she claims, we may find her under a different name." Fournier promised to investigate, and Poirot and Catherine stepped back into the sunlight. Their next destination, a telegraph office, to send inquiries to London. As they walked, Catherine's gaze lingered on the crowd, her intuition still at work. "Monsieur Poirot," she said suddenly, there's something else. On the train, I saw Ada speaking to Major Knighton, Van Aldine's secretary. It was brief, just a moment in the corridor, but they seemed familiar, not like strangers. Poirot stopped, his expression unreadable. Familiar, mademoiselle. This is most intriguing. Major Knighton presents himself as a loyal servant, yet his eyes betray calculation. Tell me, what was the nature of this familiarity? Catherine frowned, searching for the right words. It wasn't affection, exactly. More like recognition. Like they shared a secret, but not a warm one. Ada looked away quickly, as if she didn't want to be seen. Poirot's mind churned. Knighton, the silent observer in the dining car, had already piqued his interest with his watchful demeanor. Could he be linked to Ada, perhaps as an accomplice in a larger scheme? The ruby's theft suggested a professional hand, and the murder brutal, yet precise, pointed to a motive beyond mere greed. Poirot felt the puzzle's edges sharpening, but the center remained elusive. Their walk took them to a telegraph office tucked between a boulangerie and a flower stall. Poirot composed a message to a contact in London, a retired stage manager with an encyclopedic memory for performers. If Ada Mason is an actress, he murmured to Catherine, we shall find her in the footlights of the past. As they waited for a response, Poirot suggested a detour to the Promenade des Anglais, where the sea sparkled like a sheet of sapphires. The promenade was alive with tourists and locals, parasols twirling and laughter mingling with the crash of waves. Catherine seemed to relax, her shoulders easing as she watched a group of children chase seagulls. This place is so beautiful, she said, almost to herself. It's hard to believe something so dark could happen here. Poirot nodded, his gaze on the horizon. Beauty, mademoiselle, often conceals the darkest truths. The blue train is a jewel, yet it carries a poison. We must find its source. Their conversation was interrupted by a boy delivering a telegram. Poirot tore it open, his eyes scanning the text. Mon Dieu, he whispered, his voice tinged with triumph. Ada Mason is indeed known to the stage. She performed under the name Kitty Kid, a minor actress in London's West End, known for her skill in male roles, boys, young men, even soldiers. She left the stage 5 years ago, her departure abrupt. Catherine's eyes widened. Kitty Kid. Then the boy. It could have been her, disguised to slip away with the ruby. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. It is possible, mademoiselle. Kitty Kid, with her theatrical training, could don a disguise as easily as a glove. But why? To steal the ruby, yes, but the murder, does it serve her purpose, or another's? They returned to the station, where Poirot sought out Ada Mason. She was in the hotel adjacent to the platform, where the train's passengers had been housed pending the investigation. Ada sat in a corner of the lounge, her hands folded, her plain dress a stark contrast to the room's gilded decor. Her eyes, however, were sharp, and Poirot noted the faintest tremor in her fingers as he approached. Mademoiselle Mason, he said, his tone deceptively mild, or perhaps I should say Mademoiselle Kid. Your performance on the stage was admirable, but your role on the blue train is far more intriguing. Ada's face paled, but she recovered quickly, her voice steady. I don't know what you mean, Monsieur Poirot. I'm just a maid, nothing more. Poirot smiled, a cat toying with its prey. A maid, yes, but one with a flair for the dramatic. Tell me, why did you disembark at Lyon, dressed as a boy, with a bag that held, perhaps, the heart of fire? Ada's composure cracked, her eyes darting to the door. I never left the train. You're mistaken. Catherine, standing behind Poirot, spoke softly. I saw you, Ada, at Lyon. You moved so carefully, like you were afraid of being seen. What were you carrying? Ada's lips trembled, but she shook her head. You're wrong. I was with Madame Kettering all night, until she was found. Poirot leaned closer, his voice low and insistent. Mademoiselle, the truth is a fragile thing, but it cannot hide forever. You were seen, and your past betrays you. Speak now, or the law will speak for you. Ada's eyes filled with tears, but she held her silence, her hands clenching in her lap. Poirot stepped back, satisfied for now. We shall speak again, mademoiselle, he said, bowing slightly. The stage is set, and the curtain will rise. As he and Catherine left the lounge, Poirot felt a surge of certainty. Ada Mason, or Kitty Kid, was a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole. The ruby's theft was one crime, the murder another, and the threads connecting them were tangled with motives he had yet to unravel. Catherine's intuition had illuminated a path, but the destination remained shrouded in shadow. The day waned, the Riviera's golden light fading to a soft lavender. Poirot and Catherine dined at a seaside restaurant, the murmur of waves a soothing counterpoint to the tension of the case. Over a plate of bouillabaisse, Catherine voiced a new thought. Monsieur Poirot, what if Ada wasn't acting alone? That look she shared with Whodunit felt like they were part of something bigger. Poirot nodded, his spoon pausing mid-air. You are wise beyond your years, mademoiselle. A conspiracy, perhaps, with the ruby as its prize. But the murder who benefits? Derek Kettering, perhaps, or Morel, or even the Comte de la Roche. And yet, I sense another hand at work, one we have not yet seen. As they finished their meal, a messenger arrived with a note from Fournier. The inspector had uncovered a new lead. A witness at Lyons Station had seen a boy board a local train, heading toward Marseille. The description matched Catherine's, down to the cap and bag. Poirot's eyes sparkled. The chase continues, mademoiselle. Tomorrow, we follow this trail to Marseille. The heart of fire burns brightly, and it will lead us to the truth. Chapter 10. The betrayal revealed. The sun hung low over Nice, casting a golden veil across the stationary blue train, its azure cars gleaming like a dormant dragon coiled on the tracks. Hercule Poirot stood in the station's shadow, his small frame radiating purpose, his mustache a precise crescent framing a face etched with determination. The murder of Ruth Kettering, the theft of the heart of fire ruby, and the web of deceit spun by the train's passengers had brought him to this moment, a pivotal confrontation that would peel back layers of lies. Catherine Grey, his unexpected ally, stood beside him, her grey eyes sharp with the same resolve that had made her observations invaluable. Today, Poirot would test Ada Mason, the maid unmasked as Kitty Kid, and navigate the tangled motives of Derek Kettering, Morel, and others, seeking the truth that shimmered just beyond his grasp. The air was thick with the scent of salt and diesel, the station bustling with travellers, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their midst. Poirot had requested Ada Mason's presence at the hotel lounge adjacent to the platform, a setting he chose for its public yet intimate atmosphere, a stage for truth to emerge. Catherine, at his side, adjusted her simple navy hat, her calm demeanour belying the tension of the moment. Monsieur Poirot, she said softly, do you think Ada will confess? She seemed so frightened yesterday, but also defiant. Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his expression remained grave. Mademoiselle Grey, fear and defiance are the twin masks of guilt. Ada Mason, or Kitty Kid, has played many roles, but today, Poirot will direct the scene. We shall see if her performance holds. They entered the lounge, a grand space with velvet drapes and gilded mirrors, its elegance a stark contrast to the grim purpose of their visit. Ada sat at a corner table, her hands folded tightly, her plain black dress making her appear almost spectral against the opulent backdrop. Her face was pale, her eyes darting to the door as Poirot and Catherine approached. Mademoiselle Mason, Poirot began, his voice smooth as silk but edged with steel. Or shall I say, Mademoiselle Kidd, the time for masquerades is over. You have much to explain. Ada's lips parted, but no sound came. She glanced at Catherine, then back to Poirot, her fingers tightening until her knuckles whitened. I've told you, Monsieur Poirot, I'm just a maid. I don't know what you want from me. Poirot sat across from her, his posture impeccable, his gaze unrelenting. What I want, mademoiselle, is the truth. You were seen at Lyons Station, disguised as a boy, carrying a bag that may have held the heart of fire. You lied about seeing a man in Madame Kettering's compartment. Your past as Kitty Kid, the actress, betrays your skill in deception. Speak, or the law will speak louder. Ada's composure cracked, her eyes filling with tears. I didn't kill her, she whispered, her voice trembling. I swear it, Monsieur Poirot. I lied, yes, but not about murder. I was afraid of what I'd seen, of what I knew. Poirot leaned forward, his voice softening but no less insistent. And what did you see, mademoiselle? What knowledge drove you to disguise yourself and flee? Ada's breath hitched, her hands twisting in her lap. It was the ruby. I knew it was dangerous, that someone wanted it. Madame Kettering, she was so proud of it, but also afraid. That night, I heard her arguing with someone in her compartment. I didn't see who, but it was a man's voice, low and angry. I was outside, waiting to attend her, when I heard a cry. I was too scared to go in. When I finally did, she was gone." Catherine's brow furrowed, her intuition stirring. "Ada, why didn't you tell the truth from the start? Why the disguise?" At Lion, Ada's eyes dropped to the table. I thought if I stayed, I'd be next. The ruby, it's cursed. Everyone says so. I wanted to get away, to disappear. The boy's clothes were just something I had, from my acting days. I didn't take the ruby, I swear." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. Ada's story was plausible, but incomplete, a half-truth woven with fear. He was about to press further when the lounge door swung open, admitting Morel, Derek Kettering's tempestuous mistress, her scarlet dress a blaze of defiance. Her dark eyes locked onto Ada, then flicked to Poirot, her lips curling into a sneer. "So, this is where you corner the poor maid, Monsieur Poirot. She's just a servant, not your murderer." Poirot rose, bowing slightly. "Mademoiselle Morel, your concern for Mademoiselle Mason is touching, but misplaced. Perhaps you have something to share. You were, after all, close to Monsieur Kettering, who is now under arrest for Madame Kettering's murder." Morel's laugh was sharp, like breaking glass. "Derek, he's a fool, but not a killer. I told you what I saw. He was in Ruth's compartment that night, arguing. I heard her scream, and he came out, his face like thunder. If you want the truth, ask him, not this trembling mouse." Ada flinched, her tears spilling over. Poirot's gaze shifted between the two women, sensing a collision of motives. Morel's accusation against Derek was convenient to convenient. Was she protecting herself, or someone else? And Ada's fear, was it genuine, or another act? He decided to push harder. "Mademoiselle Morel," he said, his tone deceptively mild, "you speak with such certainty. Yet you, too, were near Madame Kettering's compartment that night. A torn silk scarf, scented with your perfume, was found there. Care to explain?" Morel's face tightened, but she recovered quickly, tossing her head. "I visited Ruth. Yes, we argued. She called me names, said I was ruining Derek. I left her alive, Monsieur. That scarf must have been planted. Someone's trying to frame me." Catherine, silent until now, spoke up. "Planted? That's a bold claim. Mademoiselle Morel, who would want to frame you, and why?" Morel's eyes narrowed, but she didn't answer. Poirot noted the hesitation, filing it away. "Mademoiselle Mason," he said, turning back to Ada, "you claim fear drove your lie, your disguise. But fear of whom? The man you heard arguing with Madame Kettering, did you recognize his voice?" Ada shook her head, her voice barely audible. "No, monsieur. It was muffled, angry, but I couldn't tell. I only know it wasn't Monsieur Kettering. His voice is sharper, more clipped. This was deeper." Poirot's mind raced. A deeper voice ruled out Derek, whose tenor was distinctive, but opened new possibilities. Major Knighton, perhaps, or the Comte de la Roche, whose suave tones could mask menace. Or was it another passenger, one yet to emerge from the shadows? He stood, his decision made. "Mademoiselle Mason, you will remain here, under the watch of Inspector Fournier. Mademoiselle Morel, your testimony is noted, but not yet complete. We shall meet again." As he and Catherine left the lounge, Poirot felt the weight of new clues settling into place. Ada's confession, partial though it was, confirmed her role as Kitty Kid and her attempt to flee at Lion. Morel's accusation against Derek, coupled with her own proximity to the crime scene, suggested a tangled motive: jealousy, perhaps, or a deeper scheme. The ruby's absence loomed large, its cursed reputation a spectre over the case. They stepped into the afternoon sun. The station's bustle a jarring contrast to the lounge's tension. Catherine's voice broke the silence. "Monsieur Poirot, do you believe Ada? She seems genuinely afraid, but there's something she's still hiding." Poirot nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "She hides, mademoiselle, because she is caught in a web not entirely of her making. But the threads are loosening. We must now speak to Monsieur Kettering, to test Mademoiselle Morel's claims." They found Derek in a holding cell at the Nice police station, courtesy of Inspector Fournier. The cell was stark, its stone walls a far cry from the Blue Train's luxury. But Derek's demeanor remained defiant, his dark eyes blazing as Poirot and Catherine entered. "So, the great detective comes to gloat," he said, leaning against the wall, a cigarette dangling from his fingers. "I didn't kill Ruth Poirot. You're wasting your time." Poirot's smile was serene, but his eyes were sharp. "Monsieur Kettering, I waste nothing, least of all time. Mademoiselle Morel claims you were in your wife's compartment, arguing. Moments before her death, she heard a scream. What say you?" Derek's laugh was bitter. "Morel, she'd sell her own soul to save herself. Yes, I was with Ruth that night. We argued about money, about her damned ruby, about everything. She was going to leave me, take her father's millions and that gem, and start over. I left her alive, Poirot. I swear it." Catherine tilted her head, her voice gentle but probing. "You were angry, Monsieur Kettering, angry enough to lose control." Derek's eyes flashed, but he shook his head. "I'm no saint, Mademoiselle Gray, but I'm no murderer. Ruth was alive when I left. I went to the lounge car, had a drink. Ask the barman, he'll remember." Poirot's mind noted the alibi, simple but verifiable. "And this argument, monsieur, what was its heart? The ruby, you say, but what else?" Derek hesitated, his jaw tightening. "She knew about Morel, said she'd ruin me, make sure I got nothing. Her father, Van Aldine, was behind it, pushing her to cut me off. I was desperate, yes, but not enough to kill." Poirot studied him, searching for the lie. Derek's anger was real, but his denial felt true at least in part. The cigarette case, marked K, initially thought to be his, had proven otherwise, its lack of initials a clue to another player. Poirot filed this away, his thoughts turning to Major Knighton, whose subtle exchange with Ruth in the dining car lingered in his memory as they left the station. Catherine spoke again. "He's telling the truth, isn't he? About not killing her, but Morel. She's pointing fingers too quickly. It feels like she's hiding something bigger." Poirot nodded, his pace quickening. "You are correct, mademoiselle. Morel's accusation is a distraction, perhaps a shield. We must return to the train, to the scene itself. There is something we have missed, a detail that will tie these threads together." They boarded the blue train, now a silent witness to the crime, its corridors empty save for a lone guard. Poirot led Catherine to Ruth's compartment, its door, sealed but easily opened with Fournier's permission. The room was as it had been, the air heavy with the memory of violence. Poirot moved methodically, his eyes scanning every surface. The torn silk scarf, scented with Morel's perfume, lay in an evidence bag, but he sought something new, something overlooked. Catherine, standing by the window, noticed a faint scratch on the frame, barely visible in the sunlight. "Monsieur Poirot, look here. It's small, but it looks deliberate, like someone pried the window open." Poirot's eyes lit up as he examined the mark. "Formidable, mademoiselle. This is no accident. The window was opened, perhaps to pass the ruby to an accomplice outside, or to create a false trail." He opened the window, peering out at the platform below. The drop was manageable. The station's rural stop at Lion offering cover for a quick escape. His mind raced, connecting Catherine's sighting of the boy at Lion with this new clue. Ada, as Kitty Kid, could have opened the window, passed the ruby, and slipped away in disguise. But the murderer who had struck the fatal blow, Morel's presence in the compartment suggested involvement. But her motive, jealousy, greed, or both, remained unclear. As they left the compartment, Poirot's thoughts turned to a new plan. "Mademoiselle Gray," he said, "we must gather all the players, Derek Morel, the Comte, Major Knighton, and Ada, a reenactment, perhaps, to stir the truth from its hiding place. The blue train will speak again, and we shall listen." The day ended with Poirot and Catherine at a seaside cafe, the waves crashing softly as they planned the next move. Derek's arrest, Ada's confession, and Morel's accusations had peeled back layers, but the heart of the mystery, the murderer's identity, remained elusive. Poirot felt the thrill of the chase, his little grey cells humming with anticipation. The betrayal was revealed, but the final act was yet to come, and he was determined to see it through. Chapter 11. The second journey. The blue train stood poised on the tracks at Nice Station, its azure exterior shimmering under the Riviera's midday sun, a silent sentinel to the tragedy that had unfolded within its opulent walls. Hercule Poirot, his small frame cloaked in a tailored suit, stood on the platform, his eyes gleaming with the intensity of a conductor about to lead a symphony. The murder of Ruth Kettering and the theft of the Heart of Fire ruby had woven a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot was determined to unravel it. Today, he had orchestrated a daring reenactment aboard the train, a calculated move to stir the truth from the shadows of suspicion. Catherine Grey, his perceptive ally, stood beside him, her navy coat a quiet contrast to the vibrant scene, her grey eyes reflecting both curiosity and resolve. The air buzzed with the hum of anticipation, the station alive with the clatter of luggage and the chatter of travellers, yet the blue train remained a world apart, its luxury now tinged with menace. Poirot had summoned the key players, Derek Kettering, Morel, the Comte de la Roche, Major Richard Knighton, and Catherine herself to board the train once more, under the watchful eye of Inspector Henry Fournier. Ada Mason, unmasked as Kitty Kidd, was absent, detained at the police station after her partial confession, but her shadow loomed large. Poirot's plan was bold: recreate the night of the murder, retrace the train's route through the French countryside, and provoke a reaction that would betray the guilty. As they boarded, Poirot noted the tension in the group. Derek, released on bail pending further evidence, strode with a defiance that barely masked his unease, his dark eyes scanning the corridor as if expecting an ambush. Morel, her scarlet gown replaced by a sleek black dress, moved with a predator's grace, her lips curled in a half-smile that dared anyone to challenge her. The Comte de la Roche, his pinstriped suit, as impeccable as his charm, exuded a studied calm, but his fingers drummed a subtle rhythm on his cane. Major Knighton, Rufus Van Aldine's secretary, was the quietest, his broad shoulders stiff, his weathered face unreadable save for a flicker of wariness when Poirot's gaze met his. Catherine, ever observant, walked close to Poirot, her presence a steady anchor in the storm of motives. The train's interior was unchanged, its mahogany paneling and crystal chandeliers a testament to its grandeur. Yet the air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves remembered Ruth's final moments. Poirot led the group to the dining car, where the reenactment would begin. The tables were set, as they had been that fateful night, silverware gleaming, champagne flutes sparkling under the chandelier's glow. Inspector Fournier, wiry and alert, stood at the entrance, his notebook in hand, ready to record every word, every glance. "Monsieur," as Mademoiselle Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding, "we are here to retrace the night of Madame Kettering's death. Each of you was aboard this train, each of you a thread in the tapestry of this crime. Tonight, we shall recreate the moments before her murder, and the truth, it will reveal itself. I ask you to play your parts as you did then dine, converse, move as you moved. The blue train will speak, and we shall listen." Derek snorted, leaning back in his chair. "This is absurd. Poirot, you think parading us around like actors will make someone confess? I told you, I didn't kill Ruth." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his amusement. "Monsieur Kettering, the stage is set, not for confession, but for revelation. The guilty cannot hide forever, not when the light of truth is cast upon them." Morel laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "You're wasting your time, Monsieur Poirot. Derek's the one you want." He was in her compartment, screaming at her. "I heard it all." The Comte raised an eyebrow, his voice smooth as velvet. "Mademoiselle Morel, your eagerness to point fingers is notable, but surely you, too, had reason to resent Madame Kettering. Her ruby perhaps tempted you." Morel's eyes flashed, but before she could retort, Catherine spoke, her tone gentle but firm. "Let's not accuse blindly. Monsieur Poirot has a plan, and I trust it. We're here to find the truth, not to bicker." Poirot nodded, impressed by her composure. "Merci, Mademoiselle Grey. Now, let us begin." Picture the dining car as it was lively, elegant, yet simmering with secrets. "Monsieur Kettering, you dined with Mademoiselle Morel. Monsieur le Comte, you were with Madame Duval. Major Knighton, you sat alone, observing. Mademoiselle Grey, you spoke with Madame Kettering. Let us recreate this scene." The group complied, though reluctance hung in the air like a fog. Waiters, briefed by Fournier, served a light meal, their movements mirroring those of the original night. Poirot watched closely, his eyes darting from face to face. Derek's hands were restless, tearing at a bread roll, while Morel's laughter was too loud, a performance for an audience she couldn't quite read. The Comte's charm was effortless, but his glances toward the corridor betrayed a nervous edge. Knighton, however, was the enigma, his silence a wall that Poirot was determined to breach. As dessert was served creme brulee, its caramel crust cracked under silver spoons. Poirot signaled to Fournier. The lights dimmed, the chandelier's glow fading to mimic the train's passage through a tunnel that night. The effect was immediate. The dining car felt smaller, the shadows deeper, the air charged with unease. Poirot's voice cut through the quiet. It was at such a moment, Messieurs, Mademoiselle, that a cry was heard from Madame Kettering's compartment. A cry, followed by silence, and then death. Let us move to the corridor, to the scene itself. The group rose, their footsteps echoing as they followed Poirot to the sleeping cars. Ruth's compartment was as it had been, its velvet curtains drawn, the air still heavy with the memory of violence. Poirot paused at the door, turning to face the group. Here, Madame Kettering met her end. Someone entered this compartment, struck her, and took the heart of fire. Who among you was here? Monsieur Kettering, you admit to arguing with her. Mademoiselle Morel, your scarf was found. Monsieur le Comte, your interest in gems is well known. Major Knighton, your silence speaks louder than words. Knighton's face tightened, his jaw clenching. I was nowhere near here, Poirot. I was in the lounge, as I told you. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet, Major Mademoiselle Gray saw you exchange a glance with Madame Kettering in the dining car, a glance that suggested familiarity. And Mademoiselle Mason Kitty shared a similar moment with you. What secrets do you carry? Knighton, composure faltered, his hand twitching toward his pocket. You're grasping at straws, Poirot. I'm Van Aldine's secretary, nothing more. Morel stepped forward, her voice dripping with venom. Don't trust him, Poirot. He's too quiet, too perfect. I saw him lurking near Ruth's compartment that night, after Derek left. Derek's head snapped up. Lurking? You never mentioned that before. Morel, what game are you playing? The Comte chuckled, his cane tapping the floor. A game, Monsieur Kettering, or a truth we've all avoided. This train is full of secrets, and I suspect Major Knighton knows more than he admits. Catherine, standing near the window, spoke softly. Monsieur Poirot, the scratch on the window frame, we found it yesterday. Could someone have passed the ruby out, perhaps to an accomplice at Lyon? Poirot's eyes lit up, his mind seizing. The clue, formidable. Mademoiselle Gray. Yes, the window is key. Let us test this theory. He opened the window, the evening breeze sweeping in, and leaned out, mimicking the action of passing something to the platform below. The group watched, their tension palpable. Knighton's face, Poirot noted, was pale, his eyes fixed on the window with an intensity that betrayed fear. Poirot turned, his voice sharp. Major Knighton, you were seen with Mademoiselle Mason, who we now know as Kitty Kidd, an actress, skilled in disguise. She fled at Lyon, dressed as a boy, with a bag that may have held the ruby. Did you orchestrate this theft? Did you open this window? Knighton's voice was low, almost a growl. You're wrong, Poirot. I am no thief. I was loyal to Van Aldine, to Ruth. I had no part in this. But his reaction, the slight tremble in his hand, told Poirot otherwise. The reenactment had worked. Nerve was fraying. Poirot pressed further, his voice rising. Then explain, Major, why your eyes betray you. Why, when I speak of the ruby, do you flinch? The heart of fire is gone, and you know more than you say. The dining car's lights flickered again, a deliberate signal from Fournier, plunging the corridor into near darkness. A gasp escaped. Morel and Derek swore under his breath. In that moment, Knighton moved, his hand darting to his pocket, but Fournier was faster, seizing his wrist. A small knife gleamed in the dim light, not drawn to attack but to conceal a desperate act. Poirot's voice was calm, triumphant. Major Knighton, your reaction betrays you. The knife, perhaps a tool for prying windows, or a threat to ensure silence. You are linked to the theft, if not the murder. Speak, or the law will speak for you. Knighton's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling. All right, Poirot, he said, his voice hoarse. I helped with the ruby. Kitty Kitschy was my contact. We planned to take it, to sell it. But I didn't kill Ruth, I swear it. The group was silent, the weight of his admission sinking in. Morel's eyes widened, the Comte's smile faded, and Derek's face hardened. Catherine, however, remained calm, her gaze steady on Poirot. Monsieur Poirot, she said, if Knighton took the ruby, who killed Ruth? The crimes are separate, aren't they?